Hi and welcome to Pixelperfect with me, Bert Monroy, the show where I show you all kinds of cool things in Photoshop and whatever else comes to mind. Today I'm going to answer a couple of requests. I'm going to put two into one. I've gotten a lot of requests for wood and a lot of requests for metal. I'm going to put the two together and make one object that has both wood and metal. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a little wooden plaque. A little wooden plaque with a little brass plate on top of it that has a name on it. Okay, so there's a bunch of steps that are involved here. Many of the textures that I create are just combinations of filters and so on. That's kind of like what wood is. It's a combination of a few different filters being manipulated to get this nice grain and burl and the kind of stuff that you would find in wood. So start off with this nice blank screen here on my Wacom Cintiq. And all you people who want one of these, look at it. It's just so nice to be able to just move your hand across the screen and even rest it right on top of there and draw directly. So I'm going to create a new layer right here, and I'm going to give that layer, I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to say it's the wood. Okay, that's the actual wood. Too many letters. There we go. Wood. And I'm going to select the shape. Nice big rectangle right about like that. And let's get a nice brown color. Let's say we choose this deep brown here. And I'm going to go ahead and fill that. I'm going to fill that with that brown. Foreground color, which is brown, normal. Click OK, and there it is. Now, in another layer on top of that, this is where I'm going to create the actual texture. I'm going to select another rectangle that's larger than the actual shape that I'm using for my plaque. The reason I'm making it larger is because one of the filters I'm going to use is going to pull in the outside color. The area outside of the selected area is going to pull it in, so you're going to see what's going to happen here. I'm going to go ahead and fill that with that color, same brown. And now comes the basis for the wood grain, which is basically a bunch of little lines. So what I'm going to start off with is noise. I'm going to say add noise and give it a large amount, monochromatic so it stays in the browns. And I'm going to push that way up to about let's say about 169 right there. I click OK. So now I got all this noise. So what is a wood grain? It's a bunch of lines like I just mentioned a second ago. So to this layer, I'm going to apply another filter. I'm going to go in here and say motion blur, because motion blur is going to kind of streak it all out, right? A nice horizontal angle. I'm going to push that distance so I have a really nice long lines. And you see what's starting to happen here? See along the edge how it's picking up that white? That's what I was trying to avoid by making this thing much larger than I needed. So now I got this really long distance here. I happen to go to 139. And keep in mind that that distance is set to pixels. So the actual resolution of your file is going to determine that actual dimension there. So don't take that as a formula. It depends on your particular image. And you can see what's happening. I can see it in the background. I can see the lines. So when I click OK, I have that. So now, I need to add some contrast to this to really make it look wooden. So I'm going to go into my adjustments and I go down to my levels here. And in levels, you see that most of my tones are in the center mid-tone area. So I'm going to push my darks into that area and my lights into that area to kind of even it all out. Click OK, and now we start to get this nice wood grain. Let me deselect that, and I'm going to clip it with the layer of the wood. So I'm going to option click between those two right there. Now I'm seeing the texture only inside the area of the wood. Now in some cases that wood is pretty good, but let's just say we want some burl. We want to give it some nice kind of additional texture. I'm going to turn the layer with the wood plaque into a selection by command clicking on the preview icon, and I'm in the layer with the texture, that layer 1 right there, that one that has the texture. I'm going to go into another filter right here called liquify. And liquify is going to give me the ability to go in there and start to twist this around. Now the first tool I got is my warping tool here, so I'm going to just go in here and make a larger brush, much larger, and I'm just going to kind of push them around. I'm just kind of pushing things Just very loosely pushing them around like so. Create these nice little textures like that. And I'm going to go over here to my turbulence. And in turbulence, I'm going to get a much larger brush. And I'm just going to hold it in place. Just holding it in place is going to create some nice little burls. See? Just like that. Maybe a little bit down here. Right in there like that. There we go. So now we have some nice little burls here and there. If you want a little knot, I can go to my blow tool. And in this particular case, I would get a much smaller brush. Let's go in here and just shrink it down this way. And I could just hold it in place, like right there on that edge. Just hold it in place and a little knot starts to form right in there like that. All right, so when I'm done, I click OK. And we'll let it take effect. And there we see that we have this nice wooden texture going on. I'm going to merge that down into the actual wood plaque. And I'm going to go and double click on that to bring up the layer styles for it and give it some dimension. Make it look three-dimensional. By giving it a bevel and emboss, which I'm going to push up the depth so I get really strong lights and darks. Set up the technique to chisel hard so I get a hard edge and make it a little bigger. Just like that. Now I don't like that white up there. I don't like that white. So I'm going to change that color. Instead of white, I'm going to use a nice kind of a yellowish color. Gives me a better tone in there. Click OK. And let's move the light right over to the side like this so we get this nice kind of an effect like that. All right, so there's the wood. So now on top of this, we're going to have a little metal plate. So I'm going to create another layer, and I'm going to call this one metal. And I'm going to select a little shape right here like that that just falls inside the area of the wooden plaque. Now, the colors that you use are going to determine what kind of metal. If I use warm tones, browns and oranges and yellows, it's going to be brass or gold. If I use grays, different shades of grays and some soft blues, it's going to be silver. We're going to go ahead with brass. Brass is going to look really nice against this wood. So I'm going to go ahead and fill it. We'll use that brown, but we'll put it in the background. And for the foreground color, let's pick a nice kind of a warmish yellow, something like that. That's good. Click OK, and with my gradient tool, set up to a reflective gradient, and from foreground to background, I'll just throw a tone right inside here like that. And we should bring up the opacity for this. Let's bring it all the way up. There we go. And there we have this nice tone happening there. I could make it at a slight angle if I want, like that. Maybe a little bigger. We're playing around with it. But that's not all. We're going to add more to this. So let's go in here and just go ahead and deselect that. Let's give that a little bevel and emboss. A very sharp bevel and emboss. Again, chisel hard. Bring up the depth so we have a nice strong effect on it, just like that. Again, instead of white, we'll get a nice yellowish color, a nice bright yellow. Click OK. And also give it a little drop shadow, a slight little drop shadow underneath because it's raised from the surface of the wood. Click OK. Now, this has to be shinier still. So I'm going to go in there and with my dodge and burn tool, I'm going to add a few more features. So let's add a little dark tone right there and maybe a little one right in there like that. Just a little tone in there. And with my dodge tool, let's go in there and lighten up a little chunk right there and maybe a little highlight right there, maybe one right down the middle. See, those little touches right there added that sense of metal. Now, if you're not sure what it looks like, look at metal. I'm sure there's some metal somewhere near you. Look at it. See what's happening. How does it react to light when it hits it? How does it show reflections? Is it polished? Is it brushed? What kind of metal is it? It's how it reacts to light that's going to determine the type of metal it is. And that's what you try to replicate here in Photoshop. Now we have to add a little name to this. So I'm going to go in here and with my text tool, I'm going to set it up to this, we'll leave with that same yellowish color right there. I'm going to go in here and click right on top of here and I'll type in some text. Revision 3, which I'm going to go in there and play around with it so that it fills up the plaque nicely. We'll bring it out here, bring it all the way to here, and bring it down so we have this nice big chunk of text. Click OK. Now, what I'm going to do to this is give it a layer style. I'm going to go in here and it's going to have a little inner shadow. See that little inner shadow, which I'm going to choke. So it's a hard edge. And maybe make the distance a little less, about 3. That should do it. Right in there so I get this nice little edge inside there. Push up that perspective, or rather that opacity a little more. Okay, so there we have this little edge. Now I'm going to take the actual metal and duplicate that layer and put that one on top of the text and clip it with the text. Just like that. And then I'm going to move it down just a little bit. With my move tool, I'm going to move it over just a little bit, down and over, just so that I don't have the same alignment of tones inside those areas here. So I get this nice little feeling like that part of the letters are recessed into the metal. So there we see, we're going to start adding sparkles to this if you want, or whatever you want, but we have a nice little metal plate on top of a wooden plate. Hope you learned something with that. Play around with different versions, different colors will give you different effects. That wood back there, imagine if you use some greens and blacks and whites, it can be Italian marble. So whatever you want it to be, it's the colors that you choose and how they react to light is going to determine what something is made of. Right? By adding little sparkles to that wood back there, it would make it look like it's highly polished. Hope you learned something from all this stuff. I want to thank my sponsors, Daddy.com, who will host your website. They will give you your domain name, and they'll even design your website for you. And if you enter the pass BERT, they'll give you an additional 10% off of any order. Now, if you got something that stumped you last week at work, or something you've been trying to figure out how to do and you just can't figure it out on your own, send me an email. Send me an email to bert@revision3.com, and I'll try to answer it right here on the show for you. Looking forward to the next show. Don't forget to play. Best way to learn is to sit there and play with all this stuff. See you in the next show. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Pixel Perfect with me, Bert Monroy, a show where I show you all kinds of cool Photoshop stuff and whatever else comes to mind. Today, I'm going to do an old favorite. It's been requested by quite a few of you. I guess when you saw it in Tech TV, you wanted to do it a little slower or whatever it is. But a long time ago, I did this little marquee. And there were some plastic letters that were fitted onto that marquee. That's what I'm going to do for you today. Create these nice little plastic letters that are transparent and have all kinds of dimension to them. So, I'm going to start right here on my little blank screen here. I'm going to pick up some tones. I'm going to get this nice light beige from my foreground and a slightly darker brown from my background, and put a little radial gradient right in the center of the image right there. That's the back of the marquee. That's just this big back part. Now on top of that, I'm going to create the little slats that the plastic letters are put into. So I'm going to create a long rectangle just like this. Right there like that. And let's get this light gray and a darker gray for the background, and throw a little radial gradient inside of that. Just like that. So now, with my Option and Command keys selected, which is the Alt and Control on the Windows, I'm going to drag it down to get a second line like that. And then again, one more all the way down at the bottom like this. There we go. So now we got all these little lines. And this one got a little cut off, no problem. We can always extend that just like that, no problem. All right, so now these are the little plates or little strips that the letters are adhered to. So now they have to stick out of the sign a little bit. To create that illusion, I'm simply going to give it a little layer style of a drop shadow. A simple drop shadow right there. As you can see, it separated those strips from the background. I click OK, and now they have a dimension to them. A little bit of a third dimension. Now, right up here is where I'm going to start to create my little sign. So let's go in here, and with black, I'm going to type right in here. I'm going to type in Bert. I wonder who that is. Okay, let's go in there and let's make this bigger. Let's make it 200 points. That's a good size right there. And in fact, we can even make it a little bigger. And I'll just do it this way because I want to elongate it a little bit. So I'll do a little scale just to get it a little bit bigger like that. All right, so now they are text. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to my warp, my text warping tool, and I'm going to bloat it out. Because what's happening here is that this plastic is kind of like rounded. It's just kind of not snug enough onto this sign, so there's a little bit of a roundness to it. So I'm going to choose the one that's going to give me that, which is bulge. But bulge, as you can see, is kind of bloating it out this way. I want to bloat it in a horizontal, so I'm going to, so it's doing it this way. So I choose vertical. See, that gave me that kind of a curve on that side. And I can give it a lot more or a little less so it's not so strong. Let's just give it just about like that. And I click OK. So now I have the basic shape that this plastic is going to take. So in a layer behind this, I'm going to hold down my command key, so it's going to create a layer behind the currently selected layer. And here, using the pen tool, I'm going to create the plastic. So I'm going to start up here at the top of the little ridge and pull out a handle that follows the contour of this curve right here. See, it's following that same contour. Go down here to the bottom, a little off to the side, and click and drag. And there I get this nice little edge of my plastic. Now I'm going to option click, so I get a corner point there, go straight across to this side, and hold down my shift key to constrain it, and click. That gave me a handle on the other side, which I'm now going to pull out with my option/alt key, pull out a handle, come up to the top, click and drag. Like that. Now, option click there to get a straight point, and holding the option key still down, I'm going to go there and close it. So now, if I need to adjust this, I can, because it is a path. So let's go in here and just stretch this out just a little bit like that. So we have this nice curvature on both sides. So in that layer, let's pick a nice light gray, like say this mid-tone gray here, and I'll go ahead and fill that stroke or that path with that color. So now, let's go back to our letters, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring down the opacity for that just a little so we can see through it, the stuff below. All right, so there. Now here's my little plastic. Now we need to give this some dimension. So in a layer on top of the plastic there, I'm going to take a nice black brush. Let's take a much larger size, like let's say this 200, that's a good size. And I'll go to my brush engine to make sure that I don't have anything turned on that I don't want. And so it's just a straight brush. I'm going to click on this side and shift click on this side, which created this long black streak. And if I want to, I can move it up a little bit. And I'm going to go in there and I'm going to clip it. I'm going to clip it with the actual layer of the plastic. So I'm going to hold down my option key and click between these two, just like that. Now, you notice the black got lighter? That's because the fill opacity was brought down. The opacity for that layer 2, the actual plastic, was lowered. So anything that gets clipped by it is going to be lowered in opacity as well. If I want it to be a little stronger, I can easily go in there and duplicate that layer. So I have two of them. See that? Made it a little darker. Now, in a layer on top of the text will be a highlight. As the highlight is going to go straight across here because there's a light coming in from somewhere. So in that layer right above that, I'm going to get white and get my brush, this time make it a little smaller. And we'll just throw a little streak right across here from click to there. So we got this nice little highlight going across, which I'm also going to bring down the opacity. So it's just a little soft little highlight like that. And I need to clip it. I need to clip that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give that layer a layer mask. There we go. And in that layer mask, I'm seeing everything. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the plastic layer into a selection by command clicking on its preview icon in the layer here and do an inverse. So everything else is selected, just like that. And then in the mask, I fill that with black. So that is now hiding the portions of that highlight outside the plastic. It's not visible out there anymore. And it's still a layer. I didn't really break anything. I didn't throw anything away. It's still in there. So now, this is clear plastic that we're seeing these letters that are stenciled onto it, right? So they have to cast a shadow. So I know my text is spelled right. I know how to spell my own name. So I can go in there and say type, rasterize the type, right there. Okay, so now it's pixels. So I'm going to duplicate that layer. Now the one in back here, I'm going to take off that warp. I'm going to go in there and say none. So it has no warp. It's straight on. And I know that it's spelt right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into layers, go down to rasterize, and say type. Rasterize the type. That second layer is no longer actual text. It can't be edited. It is now pixels. Because I'm going to do a few things to it. For one, I'm going to go in there and do a little scale. I'm going to pull it down. Pull it down like that. I'm going to pull this corner so it just matches that top corner of the letter. The same thing with the T. Just bring it over that way and just kind of stretch it down like that. Click OK. I'm going to blur it. I'm going to go in there and give it a nice little Gaussian blur. Nice and strong like that. And bring down the opacity for that layer so it's just a little hint of a shadow in back there. And then the portion down here right below the actual plastic, I could either hide that in the mask or I could just hit delete and that area is gone. So what we see here is that we have this nice little sign with these little letters that are stenciled onto a piece of thin plastic, see-through plastic, and it's wrapped onto this sign. A few steps in there, and keep in mind that it is the techniques involved that are important, not the end result. You might never have to do a little sign like this, but some of the techniques that I used in there might apply to other things that come up in your daily work schedule or just playing around at home. Hope you learned something from that. I want to thank my sponsor, GoDaddy.com, the guys who will host your website. They'll give you a domain name, and they'll even design your website for you. And sure enough, there's specials. If you go in there and you type in the code BERT, just like the piece we did today, you'll get an additional 10% off of any order at GoDaddy.com. I hope you learned something. Remember, play. Sit there and play. That's the best way to learn Photoshop. It's the most enjoyable way, too. See you at the next show. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Pixel Perfect with me, Bert Monroy, the show where I show you all kinds of cool stuff in Photoshop. And today, I'm going to do a request, a wide request. A lot of people ask for this, fire. They want to know how to do fire in Photoshop. I actually did it a long time ago. I did a little Christmas card on the screensavers where I had a little fireplace and a little fire going on. But this time I'm going to take my time and explain what's going on exactly. So we'll do some fire. Got here my little file, just plain white screen, which I'm going to invert. I'm going to make it black. And then with white, I'm going to type in the word fire. And let's use a different font. Let's use something, a nice little serif to it, like good old-fashioned Times here. Times, bold, that's good. There's my little text, word fire. Now, I know it's spelt right, so right off the bat what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in there and do a layer, rasterize the type, turning it into actual pixels. Now, I'm going to duplicate it. And let's turn off the one on top here. The one on the bottom here, I'm going to give it some color. Let's lock the transparency, and I'll get this nice yellow here for my foreground color, and for the background color, I'll get this kind of a deep orange here. In fact, you know what? We'll make it even deeper. There. And with my gradient tool, set to linear gradient, I'll throw a little gradient right inside there like that. Gives it kind of like a burning color. And let's give it a little texture too. Let's go into texture and use Craquelure right on top there, which is going to give it this nice kind of a texture like that. I'm going to leave the defaults, click OK. And now we got a little shape to it. Now we're going to create the actual fire. The one in back, the one in front here, I'm going to bring it up here. Let's take the right one. There we go. Bring it right up here. And the filter that I'm going to start with only works from left to right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just give this a little rotation. Go in there and say rotate clockwise 90 degrees and put it right off to the side here like this. And the filter I'm going to use is a kind of a weird filter that lives under stylize. It's called wind. And wind is going to give me these nice little hairs. And I'm going to say from left, have them shoot out. And it created these little tiny hairs at the end of the letters. I'm going to hit my Command F, Control F on a PC, and do it one more time there. Now I have 3 of them. Okay, so I'm going to duplicate that layer because I'm going to need it for something else later. And let's turn off the one on top. And now the first one that we created there, I'm going to rotate it back into position. So rotate it counterclockwise to give me that. Now, I'm going to have to colorize this at one point to make it look like fire. So white cannot be colorized. Okay, white in RGB is all color. Right now it's just white, so I can't add any color to this. Grays will allow me to go in there and colorize. So I'm going to blur this whole thing. Give it a little Gaussian blur. Just a little bit, not too much, about like that. That's good. 2.4. Click OK. And remember that setting is in pixels, so 2.4 isn't a formula, say. It depends on the resolution of the file you're working on. These files that I work on here are simply 72 dpi. So if you're working on a 300 dpi file, 2.4 might not be enough. Right? But you want to get a nice blur like I got there. Right? So now there's grays. Grays can be colorized. And right now they're just gray going to transparent. What I'm going to do to add a little more tone in there, I'm going to create a layer behind this layer and fill that layer with black. That layer. And I'm going to take that text that I blurred and merge it down into that layer that I created with black. Now I have this white going to black. Those grays can be colorized. But before I colorize them, let's make them look more like fire. So let me just select this little area to kind of concentrate my effect. And I'm going to go to the filter, liquify. And liquify, I can go in here and start playing around with this. Let's get a little closer so we see what's going to happen here. And I get my warping tool here, and let's get a smaller brush. And I'm going to very lightly just kind of give it a couple little hits like that. And just very roughly just going in there and just kind of pulling out little tones, just like that. You don't have to be too neat. In fact, you can see I'm doing it very quickly here. The quicker, the rougher it becomes. If you do it too slowly, it starts to become too neat. And fire isn't very neat. Okay, it's kind of a messy thing. So let's just throw a couple of little more points here and there, like so. And we got all this stuff happening. Great. And we can kind of mess around with those higher ones there as well. So we got all this stuff going on. That's good enough. Just like that. So I click OK, and we have that little effect happening. So now I can deselect that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and colorize this. In that layer, I bring up my hue saturation controls, and I'll say colorize. And I'll push the saturation all the way up and bring this over to somewhere around, about 40, like that. Push that saturation up. So I got this really nice tone happening there. I click OK. I'll take that layer and duplicate it on itself. So now I got 2 of them. And the second one, I'm going to go in there and go into my hue saturation again. And this time I won't hit colorize, but I will move my hue slider down to about a minus, I'd say about a minus 20. Right about there, minus 19, that'll work. Push that saturation up again, like that. And see what happened there? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that layer and put it in overlay mode over the one below it. When I put it in overlay mode, now we start to see a little fire happening. So I'm going to take those 2 layers, I'm going to go ahead and merge that down. So now they're working together. And I'm going to put that layer in screen mode. Screen mode is going to allow me to see the other layers beneath it. And in fact, let's put this one behind it and then move it down into position behind our letters. Right there. So now the letters are starting to be on fire. So we have fire. What do we need now? We need smoke. So remember this guy? I created that second set. I'm going to go into that and apply that stylized wind filter one more time. Okay, make sure you're in the right layer. That's that one. All right, let's do that again. And we go to stylize, wind, and we'll say do it again. And let's do it again. One more. So we've got these long shapes. I'm going to go in there and rotate that like before. Rotate it back and bring that into position right above the whole thing like that. And blur it, just like I did before. Give it a little Gaussian blur. But this time I'll blur it a little more. Let's go with the whole 3. Click OK. And just like before, I'm going to create a layer behind it and fill it with black. And what's going to happen is I'm going to merge those two together, merge down, and go into liquify again. Now I'm really going to play with this. I'm going to get a nice big brush, really big brush, like that, and then really push these guys up. I'm going to just very crazily and kind of loosely just start pushing everything up. If they start forming these little swirls, it doesn't matter. That's what kind of smoke does. Okay, so we do all this kind of stuff like that, push them up. We might even do a couple of things like a little bloat right in here, a little bloat right in that area, and maybe a little pinch. Let's go in here and do a little pinch right up into this little area, a little pinch in there, and then warp that out some more. There we go. Get all this stuff happening like that. Click OK, and that starts to happen. And we'll wait for that to happen. The more complex the effect, the longer it takes. But what's happening now is that I'm creating all this nice little smoke that's traveling up into our scene. Now, the smoke doesn't just have little plumes. When it starts hitting the air, it starts to puff up. It starts to break up. So here's what we're going to do now. I'm going to put this layer in screen mode, just like that, so I see my letters, and I'm going to erase. With a nice big soft eraser, I'm going to erase down here. Just soften it up. See how I'm erasing just the parts that are covering the letters, so I have all that other stuff happening there? So on top of this whole mess, I'm going to create one more layer, and I got black and white as my foreground and background colors. I'm going to apply the filter Render Clouds, but I'm going to hold down my Option, Alt key, and apply that. By holding down that modifier key, I got a really strong contrasty clouds, which I'm now going to set that into screen mode, so only the light tones are showing through, and I'm going to scale that up. Let's go in there and say scale, and let's just bring this right up into this area, right up there like that. Let that happen, and then with that eraser, I'm just going to soften up those hard edges where this smoke is meeting the edge, and there's the little soft, puffy stuff at the top. So there we have the fire and the smoke that goes with it. Now remember, it's not the end result, it's how I got to that point that's important. All these different techniques can be applied with slight modifications here and there to create something totally different. I hope you learned something from that. Remember to play. That's the best way to learn in Photoshop. If there's something that you can't figure out on your own, something you've been stuck with and trying to figure out how to do this thing, send me an email. Send it to bert@revision3.com, and I'll try to do it for you here on the show. Until the next show, have a good time. See you then. Hello and welcome to another edition of Pixel Perfect with me, Bert Monroy, the show where I show you Photoshop stuff and whatever else comes to mind. I'm going to go with another request today. Another one of these requests that people want to see all the time, and that is rain. Rain is a pretty simple thing to do. It's just a couple of filters and you got rain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it a step further and really create a whole scene that will fit that rain. Okay? So right here on my screen, on my little Wacom Cintiq here, I have a little pirate ship. Very simple picture. I took it from a cruise line once, and it was a pirate ship. We weren't being attacked. We were just passing by there. Okay, so what I want to do right now is separate that sky from the sea. So using my pen tool, I'm going to select a nice little kind of a semicircular area up here, just like that. come way down into this area here and out here and close it off. Now, if you can't really see your handles and you want it to be out there, you can always go into the super data area here. Just pull that out there so we know that it's all the way out into that area like that. All right, so now that we have that selected, I'm going to go in there and turn that path into a selection. Say make selection, make sure I've got no feather. Let's go in there. That's why you got to make sure everything's set right. Click OK, and I'm in that layer, the background, so say give me a new layer via cut. So that put the ship in its own layer just like that. All right, so now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go in here and in a layer behind this, I'm going to hold down my command key and click on the new layer icon, which created a layer behind the currently selected layer. I'm going to go in there and create stormy sky. Now I got black for my foreground color. Let's go in there and change that to a kind of like a deep gray. And for my background color, I'm going to pick a blue, kind of like a murky blue, like something like about like that. Pretty murky. Click OK. And then let's just turn off this layer so we see what happens. Right in here, I'm going to give it some clouds. Now I've mentioned this before and I've done it in other shows. When I go into clouds, I get that. Let me undo that. This time I hold down my modifier key, my option, which is Alt on a PC, and apply the same thing. Render clouds, and you'll see that this time the clouds have more contrast. So those modifier keys will always change the way things work. Let's turn our little boat back on, and let's just go into that layer and just kind of go in there and scale it up a little bit. Bring it up into this area like that. And just to make it even more ominous, I'm going to throw a little black tones. Let's get a nice big brush right up there and just throw a little more blackness into the sky up in there, making it really stormy looking. Now my water area looks pretty clean right now, and it's still kind of sunny. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn that into a selection, and I'm going to create an adjustment layer on top of that of hue saturation. And that I'm going to go in there and bring down the saturation a little and darken it. So now we're starting to get this nice sense that it's real stormy there. So now comes the rain. I'm going to click a new layer on top of that and fill that layer with black. Just like that, and give it a lot of noise. A lot of noise. Add noise. Big amount like that. Now right now it's just a lot of black and white noise. So I'm going to give it some grays by giving it just a little bit of a blur more. That's going to introduce some grays in between those blacks and whites. Now that I have those grays, I can go in there and tone down this noise. So I'm going to go into my levels command, and in levels I'm going to push my black slider in so that it starts to lessen the amount of noise. You see what's happening back there? I'm going to push my white slider to make the whites really strong and bright. And the blacks a little more, so I get less and less noise. And that noise that's left behind is really bright, like that. I click OK. Now to turn that into rain, another filter is going to be put into use. I come up here and give it the motion blur filter. Motion blur, just like this. Now, I'm going to set the angle to the angle I want the rain to be coming down. I'm going to bring that distance down so it's not so strong. About, let's say that looks good. And again, that setting right there is not a formula. It's set to pixels, which means it's dependent on the resolution of the file I'm working on. So when I click OK, that rain's a little soft right now, so I might want to go into levels and kind of make it brighter. Make those whites a little stronger like that. Click OK, and I put that layer in screen mode. So now we see the rain falling on top of our scene here. So we need a little lightning. So in a layer above the clouds, but below the actual boat, I'm going to create a lightning bolt. So I'm going to create a layer right in there, a new layer, and I'm going to fill that layer with white, and there we see it. And then with a smaller brush, not quite that big, let's go a little smaller, let's go even smaller, but that's a good size right there. With black, I'm going to throw in some tones right here where my lightning bolt is going to be, right through there and down and down. Okay, so everything else in here, I'm going to just fill it up with black. Just fill everything up with black right in there. Now, if you remember my first podcast, I did some lightning. That's what I'm creating here. In that layer, I'm going to go in there and just say, give it a little render, difference clouds, invert that, and go into my levels and reduce the amount of actual clouds. Bring this way down and bring the midtones down. There's my lightning, which I'm going to put that layer in screen mode so my sky shows through. So now we got this lightning bolt hitting back there, which means we need some light on the water. So on top of the water here, I'm going to create another layer. And in that layer, I'm going to take some white And with that soft brush, I'm just going to draw a nice long shape like this. Nice long white shape. Maybe we'll make it a little straighter like that. Now, I'm going to clip it with the water so it cuts off right there at the top. Now, if you want, you could go in there and maybe do a little pinch on this. Let's distort it and close it up so it gets a little thinner towards this top. See? Just kind of closing it off right there so it gives it that sense of going off into the distance like that. Click OK. That's looking good. I'll put that layer in screen mode and bring down the opacity just a little bit. Now, it's still this big white blob there. So what's what I'm going to do? I'm going to go into the layer styles for that layer. And in my blend if modes down here, I'm going to tell it in the underlying layer, that's the stuff underneath it, I'm going to tell it to not hide these ranges of dark tones. As I pull the slider, you're going to see that some of those little tones are going to start to show through. See them coming through? There they come through in the water. See? There they go. Right in there like that. Now, they're a little kind of hard-edged, so I'm going to hold down my modifier key, my Option, Alt on a PC, and split the slider. Yeah, just split that slider just like that. And there we see all these nice little light tones starting to show through again. I click OK, and maybe we could bring that opacity back up a little more. And there we see this nice little highlight in the water being caused by the reflection of the lightning. Now, one last thing, and that is that since we have this bolt of lightning coming down, it should be reflected on the little boat itself. So let's just look at the layer of the boat. I'm going to Option click on that so we see just that layer. And we're going to look at the channels. The red, the green, and the blue. The blue is giving us the most contrast. So I'm going to duplicate the layer of blue, create an alpha channel. Remember way back a few shows ago I created a mask using alpha channel? That's what I'm doing here. So in this alpha channel, I'm going to go in there and expose some things and hide others. So I'm going to go into my adjustments and go into curves. And in curves, with my pencil tool, I'm going to go in here and take all these tones here. I'm going to force those to white. I'm going to force all that water area to white, just like that. And then the area of the boat, I'm going to force to black. And click OK. Now I'm going to invert this. I'm going to invert that so that part is visible right there. Okay, so now that I have this, I can come over here. And on my little boat, I'm going to load that layer and send that to a new layer. New layer via copy. So now I got a layer that has just the boat in it. Let's turn all that stuff back on. And there's all these little layers. So here's my layer right there, the layer of the boat. And I'm going to go into that layer and give it a layer style. And this layer style is going to have a little, just a highlight on one side. And the only thing that gives me a light on one side is the inner shadow, which is not what I want. I want it to be a highlight. So I'm going to change the color to a white, like that, and change the mode to, say, screen, which is going to give me this nice little highlight right in there. And we can bring the distance down to about, say, 1, and the size to about 2. So it creates this nice little highlight on the edges of the boat. I click OK, and there we see we have this stormy scene with rain, lightning, and all kinds of stuff going on. I hope you learned something from that one. And again, remember, it's not the end result. It's all the steps that got me to that point. Because sometimes a slight modification of something will totally change the effect. I'd like to thank my sponsors at GoDaddy.com. The guys who will host your website, they'll give you a domain name, and they'll even design a thing for you. And if you enter my code, BERT, as you see it right there on the screen, they will give you an additional 10% of any order that you place with them. Now remember, if there's something that you're not sure how to do, or you just wanted to know how to do something, or some part of Photoshop you're not sure about, send me an email. Send it at bert@revision3.com, and I'll be glad to do it for you here on the show. Now, I'm not going to promise I'll do everything that I get, but if there's something that gets requested by a lot of people, it's going to end up here on the show. Hope you learned something from this. Remember to play. The best way to learn is to sit there and play. See you in the next show. Take care. welcome to another episode of Pixel Perfect with me, Bert Monroy, where I show you all kinds of Photoshop tricks and whatever else comes to mind. I want to do a couple of things today. I want to answer a bunch of emails that requested something in particular. And before I get started, I want to thank my sponsors, GoDaddy.com. And I also want to make something very clear. I read a lot of the emails and stuff, and no, there is no script. I'm not reading something right now. This is all coming from the heart. So when I go to the ad stuff, yes, I do have to read something because it's not in my head. And so I'm going to read this for you. It says here, get $96 in free extras with your domain name from GoDaddy.com. Each domain includes free hosting with a website builder, a free blog, complete email, and much more. Plus, enter a code, Pixel, which should be appearing right there on your screen, when you check out and get your .com domain name for just $6.95 a year. It's a lot less than I'm paying. Some restrictions apply. See site for details. Get your piece of the internet at GoDaddy.com. Okay, now, I had to read that part because everything else, that's it. No more script. All right, so what I'm going to do right now is answer something that was asked for by Mark McClure and Ben Matthew, Jan Winther, Gregory Warner, Debbie, and it deals with, and even Derek Nugent. I'm going to stick something in there that he asked for. They all want to see the brush engine to explain what the brushes are all about. Well, I'm going to try to make it as clear as possible in this particular episode. Now, the first thing I want to do is first talk about this thing, the stylus, the Cintiq that I'm working on, or the Wacom tablet. Cintiq is by Wacom. It's the tablet that's right on the screen. But the thing that's important here is the fact that these stylus will control a lot of the functions within that brush engine. I'm going to go down here, and in my system preferences on my Mac, same thing would be on your PC, there's a little guy here called Wacom Tablet. Now, right here is where you start to control things of how the tablet is going to work, in particular how the stylus is going to work. Now, one of the main things is pressure sensitivity. Now, you see right here where it has this little current pressure? There's a way of testing this. If I just touch the screen now, you'll see a little bar starts to work there. See how it's coming in? The softer I press, you see that the little blue line is down towards the bottom, and I press hard, it goes to full. Now, if when you press hard, you're not getting that full bar there, then you want to probably play around with your tip feel. Now, there's no formula here. People wanted to know how I calibrate it. No, it depends on my hand, you know, how I'm going to calibrate it. Your hand is different. You might have this little tiny hand, or you might have a big giant hand. So pressure is going to depend on you. So you would set things up in this window here, what the buttons are going to do, and so on. Like here, you see that I have my front button and my back button both set to double click. That's for this particular machine here in the studio. My back button at home is doing something else, and so on. It all depends on your preference, your workflow, and so on. But that pressure, current pressure, is controlled. Just clicking on the screen anywhere, you're going to see that the little bar is going to move. And if you press at a comfortable, firm pressure and you're getting the full bar across, then you're working well. If the minute you touch the screen it jumps to full, then it's a little too strong. So you're going to have to play around with that bar until you get a really nice feel, so that it's a light bar when you're slightly touching the screen, and when you press down hard, you get a full bar. Now, hard, I don't mean putting your hand through the whole screen. So again, it depends on your preference. Okay, so I'm going to just quit out of here, and I'm going to hide my little dock down there so we don't have to see that thing. And let's go into Photoshop. Now we're going to talk about the brush engine. Now, the brush engine was developed back in version 7 of Photoshop, before the whole CS line. And the brush engine is what turned Photoshop into what I consider a true painting program. Because for the first time, you had the ability to go in there and create brushes that are randomized as you apply a stroke. Now, you were always able to create custom brushes and make those brushes behave in certain ways. But the brush engine, which I'm going to pull out right here so we see it as a standalone window, the brush engine is what really revolutionized the way Photoshop works. So what I'm going to do right now is to explain how this guy works. Now, creating a brush. The brush could be anything that you select. It could be the eye on a person, it could be a tree in a scene. Anything that you select with the rectangular marquee tool can become a brush. Now, one thing to keep in mind is the values in that brush. Where that brush is a pure black, that brush will be 100% opaque. Where that brush has white, it'll be 100% transparent. Any color or value in between, 50% gray or green or something else, other than black, will be a certain level of transparency. So let's say I use a 50% gray as my brush to create my actual brush. 50% gray means that brush is going to automatically be 50% transparent. Even if I have the opacity on the brush in the toolbar set to 100%, it's going to be 50% transparent because I did not create the original brush with a pure black. If I bring the opacity down to 50%, then that brush will be 25% transparent because the original brush was made with a 50% gray. So, keeping that in mind, when you're selecting some object, keep in mind that certain areas that are not black are going to be transparent based on that particular value in the brush. Now here, what I'm going to do is I have a path. There's a little path right there. And that little path is a little maple leaf, which happens to be the little brush that's included with the program right here. This little maple leaf is what I'm going to recreate for you right now. These three brushes here happen to be mine. The brushes that I created early on in the alpha testing of Photoshop 7. I created a bunch of brushes which I used for a painting at that time. So that's what I'm going to show you right now. I have a path, and I'm going to take that path, I'm going to fill it with black. Now that path right now is, I turned it off, and that was the shape, and there's full black. Now I'm going to select this area to turn it into a brush. Now notice how big I selected it? All that area is white, and there's a little leaf inside. When I come over here and say Define Brush Preset, you notice that it's only seeing the leaf. And that little number, 86 underneath, that represents the size in pixels of this particular brush tip. Let me cancel that. And I'll select a little closer, like that. Define Brush Preset. Notice it's still the same exact little leaf with the 86 underneath. Because that white before was not brush. It did not see that as a brush. So therefore it was just making believe it didn't exist. So I can go in here and give it a name. We'll call it leaf. And click OK. Now I can throw it away. Don't need it anymore, and we'll deselect. Now, in your brush palette here, the brush will appear at the very end. Now the name, if you happen to use, say, small list, then the name will be there, right there, leaf, the name that we gave it. I prefer myself the small thumbnail so I can see it. So there's the little brush. I have now selected the brush. And you see that right off the bat, in the preview, in the brush engine, we see what the stroke is going to look like. So if I go ahead and do a stroke, it's going to look just like in the preview. And what's happening is that the brush is laying down a tip at a time. The whole shape of that leaf is being applied along the life of that stroke. So what happens with the brush engine is that we have the ability to randomize how those tips are laid down. Now, the first thing you come into is the brush presets, which shows you all the brushes. We have one control down here, which is the master diameter, the size. You can also control that up here, see, master diameter. Hardness is grayed out right now. Hardness is grayed out because of the fact that you cannot set a soft edge to a complex brush like this one. If it was just a circle or a square, that wouldn't be a problem. But a complex brush like this leaf shape, you can't apply a soft edge to it. So hardness is grayed out. I'm going to go in my brush engine, go down to brush tip shape. Here's where we can start to control things. Again, we have diameter. Now I can bring it down to a little tiny brush, and we see it in the preview. I can push it way up. Now there's just so much space that I can preview, so I can't see a big brush. But if I bring the cursor over, you see that I do have a big giant brush. So let's bring this down to a manageable size, about so big. So we have this little leaf there, maybe a little bit bigger, right about there. Okay, so we got this nice little leaf. Now, these little controls here, this controls the roundness of it. If I move this, you see that they're all getting flat. See that? This controls the angle. If I move that, they're all going to move together. It's kind of like little rockettes, right? They're all dancing together. The beauty of the rest of the controls is that we randomize that so every tip is going to act independently of its neighbors. Again, we have the hardness, which is grayed out, and the spacing. Now, spacing. If I set the spacing to 100%, that means I have one distinct tip next to one distinct tip. They're just about touching at the very edge, right there, as you can see right in there. Anything larger than 100% is going to give you a dotted line. Anything smaller starts to make them get into each other. They start to get into each other's space, go down to the minimum, which is 1%, and you get a fairly solid line. That little gray area you see in there is because the little stem underneath the leaf is causing that little negative area, so we're getting that little halo inside there. Let's bring the spacing up to a manageable, about 75%, 73%. That's good. Now we look at the stroke and we see that it looks just like the preview. Now these guys here, they're the ones that are going to randomize this. I'm going to click on the word, not on the little dial. I'm going to click on the word because that way it's going to bring me right into the actual controls for that brush tip. So right off the bat, we see that we have pen pressure is set up. So we have this little leaves that are getting smaller in distance and so on. I'm going to change that to off. Now look here, you notice that I have pen tilt, stylus wheel, rotation, fade. All these things can be set up. And pen pressure, of course, is controlled by the stylus, as we discussed a moment ago. I set the size jitter right here. What is jitter? Jitter is a variety. It's making them random. It's randomizing so that every time it lays down a tip, it's going to be a different size. So if I move my size jitter up to 100%, we see that all the little brushes, all the little leaves are changing in size. Okay? Each one is a different size than its neighbor. Now we have a minimum diameter. Let's come back over here and we look at this guy at the very beginning here. He's getting so small that he became a little dot in the background. So we have a minimum diameter, which means that I can set that so that it's not going to get any smaller than, say, 20% of my brush size. So if I have a 100 pixel brush, my smallest tip is not going to be any smaller than 20 pixels. So we have a minimum diameter set. Then we have the angle. Now we see that all the little brushes are all pointing straight up, right? Angle jitter is going to randomize the angle. So as I move that around, you see that they're all moving in different directions. I set that to 100%. Going back to brush tip, that's the same thing as this little arrow that I moved around. I said they were all moving together at that point. Now they're moving independently. Each leaf is a different size and a different angle than its neighbor on either side. Roundness. Again, that's the same thing as this wheel, where I kind of control the roundness of the, got kind of flat. Well, here it's going to again do it randomly. So when I move my roundness up, I'm going to push that to 100%. Now we see that the leaves are all different roundness, and there is a minimum roundness, which right now I have set to 25%. So they're not going to get so flat that they become a little line. They're just going to get flat enough to introduce that illusion of foreshortening. So now the leaves start to look a little different. See? Now as I do my stroke, each leaf tip is a different shape, different size than its neighbor on either side. So now we're going to jump down here to scattering. Now scattering, right off the bat, something happened. Let's turn these guys off so we can explain them. And turn off the pen pressure again. And again, everything's controllable by pen pressure or other settings. Now, scattering. Right now, when I do a stroke, they're following my stroke. What scattering does is going to move the tips away from the stroke in different directions. I can turn off both axes and you see that the little leaves are going up and down, see? If I put on both axes, then they're going to move in all different directions. Totally different directions. So now my stroke starts to have a little more of a random feel to it. Let's undo that. Okay. Count. Now, I said before that it lays down a tip at a time, one tip next to another. Count is going to randomize the amount of tips. I'm going to go in there, send that all the way up to 16. See how many leaves? So now my stroke is really thick, as you can see there. Let's bring that down to something a little more manageable. Let's bring it down to about, just a 2. Okay, now count jitter is going to randomize that count so that in some cases I'll get a little clump of leaves, in other cases I'll get a nice open area. So when I do a little stroke, now it's starting to really look random. And I'm going to bring down that scatter a little bit so that it's not so far apart. All right, let's undo. And texture. Now texture is any pattern that you've installed, anything that you've saved, and it will be seen inside of our leaves. Like for instance here, as I move this, you'll see that the little squares are showing up in my leaves in the preview. See? So it could be any texture that you have saved in the program is going to be then used here. You can control the effect, the mode it's going to have, and the scaling, the depth, all that stuff can be controlled. Now in this particular case, we're just creating a little tree. So I'm not going to use texture. Dual brush. Now right off the bat, something happened because I have a particular brush selected. What happens here is that a second brush is being utilized as a kind of a mask for the first brush. All right? So let's just say we use like this soft edge brush here. See how the edges of my stroke are now soft based on the softness of that brush? And again, I can control the diameter. See? And you can see it in the preview what's happening. So it's the second brush is affecting my main brush. Obviously, we're not going to use that one here either. Color dynamics. That one we are going to use, and that one, unfortunately, we cannot preview. That one we can't see in the preview. But by setting the foreground and background jitter to 100%, what's going to happen is that it's going to jump between the foreground and the background colors, back and forth, again, randomly, so that each tip will now have a different size, a different angle, a different roundness, and a different color based on those foreground and background. So I can also play around with the hue jitter. If I push that all the way up, it's going to introduce additional colors. So right now my foreground is black and my background is white. It'll introduce some reds and greens and purples. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lower that hue jitter down to about 10%, 11%. So it's not going to introduce too many additional colors. But I am going to play around with saturation and brightness. So the foreground and background colors will be applied to each leaf and a different saturation, different brightness. Now purity right now is set to 0. Moving purity in either direction is going to push the brushes towards a grayscale. Unlike saturation, which does it for individual leaves, what happens in purity is going to take the entire stroke and bring it down towards grayscale. So that one we're going to leave at 0. We want to keep the brightness of our colors. Other dynamics, we'll cover that one in a little while, and the guys below in a few minutes. So now that I have all this stuff happening here, I can go in and let's just create a little layer like this. And in my swatches, I'll pick this bright green for my foreground and this darker green for my background. And as I draw a stroke, you see that I'm getting this nice little tree here. See? There's a tree. That's the front part of a tree. Okay, and I can take that bright color, that bright green, make it a really dark green, and in the layer behind this, I make the brush a little smaller. Gonna click on my open and close bracket keys there, and then I could throw some leaves in the background there, which are darker, and they're the leaves in the back of the tree. So what would happen is in between these two, I would put another layer that would have all the happy little branches that live inside there that are holding all these little leaves in place. So there you see that we created a very full tree in 2 strokes. One in one layer, which is the foreground leaves, one in the background layer, which is the background leaves. I can add some of those dark tones to the one in front as well. So I can add a couple of dark tones in here, maybe a couple up in here. It starts to add a little more dimension to our tree. Okay, so let's go in here and do a different kind of a thing now. What I'm going to do now is something that I had Derek Nugent asked for. He wanted stitching. He wanted stitching. So what I'm going to do right now is create a stitch, because he said he had to do this shirt and had to have stitching on it. That can also be done with a brush. I'm going to first create a little stitch, and I'll create a little circle like this, and I'll fill it with black, duplicate it straight across like that, and then create a little rectangle in between the two, just like so, and fill that with black. There we have one stitch. See? Little stitch. Select that and turn that into a brush. Define brush preset. There it is. Dump it. Click OK. And now I get my paintbrush and select that little stitch. There it is. And we can see in the preview that it's just one big blur up like that, right? So let's go in there and randomize this. First thing I'm going to do is increase the spacing. And I'm going to give it a lot of spacing so that it has a nice spacing like that. See? So there's where it goes into the fabric and it comes back out, maybe a little bit more. There we go, like that. So now, I'm going to go in here and see what's happening. There's my stitch. Doesn't look very good, does it? What we need to do now is to have it follow the stroke. In fact, I'll even make a path where my stitching is going to be. This is the little shirt here, and it's going to have something that looks like that. Now, if I take that stroke and go ahead and stroke it with that brush, it creates that. That's not the way the stitching looks. So let's go back over here to our shape dynamics. And remember how everything is controllable by the stylus? Well, look at angle. Angle has 2 additional controls: initial direction and direction. Now, initial direction means that wherever I start, that's the direction that the stroke is going to take. Direction means as I move, the stitching is going to follow the angle of my pen. So having it set to direction, and let's bring the angle jitter back down to 0. Let's bring the size jitter back down to 0, and let's bring the roundness back to 0. Now we see that we have the stitch that's going to be following that angle. So if I take my path and stroke it this time, we see that it now follows the angle. See? So it's controlling how that little brush is moving. So let's quickly look at some of the others here. Now, I'm going to just get a very simple brush like this little circle brush here. And make it a little bigger, and that's what it's doing right now, just like that. Go in here and let's make the spacing solid, and we see other dynamics. Right there we see that it's running out of paint. It's set to opacity and flow are both set to pen pressure. So if I press slightly, I'm going to get a transparent brush. If I press hard, I'm going to get a really deep black brush. Let me undo that. I could also set these. Let's turn this guy off, and I'm going to set the opacity. I'm going to set the fade. Here's where you control fade. So I can have a fade of, let's say, 50 pixels. So when I draw a little stroke, it's going to run out at 50 strokes. Let's set this to 250. And I create a little stroke. And we see that it ran out of paint when it ran to that many steps. So that controls the opacity of that brush and the flow, how much paint is going to be applied, how translucent it's going to be, and so on. Okay, let's turn this off and look at the stroke here. The other guys I'm going to kind of show you right here in the preview window. And I'm not crazy about these particular features down here because they don't have any control. That's part of the problem. Noise, for instance. I'll go in here and set up noise. Let's get a soft edge brush so we can see what noise is going to do. Okay, I'm going to add some noise right there. And see in the preview, I've created noise. The problem with that is that there is no control. It'll create the noise or no noise. If I want to be able to control the amount of noise, so what I do is I do my strokes in a layer and then give them a filter. That way with the filter I can control the amount of noise, the monochromatic or non-monochromatic and so on. I have more control by doing it in a layer. Turn off noise, wet edges, you can see what's happening. It's turning the center part of that brush into a slight translucent area and pushing the solid color out to the outer edges. Let's turn that one off and airbrush. Now airbrush is an interesting little one. What happens here is when I click and hold it down, you're going to see that the brush is going to start to build itself up. And first you got to turn it on. Okay, there we go. Click and you see that, see how it's building up? Eventually it becomes a solid point. Let's undo that again. I just click and hold it in place and you can see that it's building up the paint. Now smoothing is a good one. Yet it's very, very subtle. What smoothing does is going to go in there and take your stroke and eliminate any little bumps that it might have. It kind of smooths out the stroke. But again, it's a very subtle one. For me, it's better to create a little path that has the direction that you want your stroke to take. That way you have full control of how it's going to move and how smooth it's going to be, and simply stroke the path. Protect texture, that's a good one, because if your brush has a texture and there's a texture in the image, you're not going to have one texture override the other, causing moire patterns and all kinds of weird stuff. So that gives you a basic idea of what the brush engine is doing, all the functions within it and so on. Now, the best thing to do, of course, like I always say, is to go in there and play. Experiment, try a few different things. I've done a bunch of shows where on Tech TV where I use that brush engine, and I've done quite a few segments here where I've used it, and in the future there'll be many more. So I will come back and revisit some of the functions in there as time goes on. I hope you learned something on this show. Get in there and play with that. That's a wonderful little tool that lets you experiment and have a good time with it. See you in the next show. welcome to Pixel Perfect with me, Bert Monroy, a show where I show you all kinds of Photoshop stuff. So, guess what just happened? It started shipping, CS3. So on this show, what I want to show you is some of the newer features. I'm going to show you my favorite ones. I haven't got time to show you everything because it would be a couple of shows, and in the near future, I will show you everything. But for right now, I'm going to show you my favorite stuff, the stuff that pertains to me, and primarily being an artist and so on. So, as you can see right off the bat, we see that the interface is different. For one thing, we have a single column here. We can set it back to the two column, but we have a single column for all the tools so that we have more screen real estate open to us. We can see that all the additional windows are all tucked into this nice little packet up in the top here. If I want to see my brush engine, I can just click on this and it opens it up and I can close it. The old well that used to be on the top there is gone. It's all now in this little well on the right side, where we have a lot more stuff visible with little icons as well as their names so we can see how things are. Here's my layers, there's my channels. They're all still here, but I can close them at any time and they're accessible. Now, one of the main things that I really like, which is something I've been asking for a long time, I've got this great little picture of good old Marty and me. Martin Sargent, one of the other Revision 3 shows. I'm going to do some stuff to here. Now, what I want to do here is create some filters. I want to use some filters. The problem with previous versions of Photoshop is that when you applied a filter, that was it. That filter was applied to the layer or the background, and that was it. Let's just say we applied maybe 20 different filters, right? And then we close the file. Well, history's gone at that point, so we can't go backtrack and get rid of some of those filters. But with non-destructive filters, you can apply as many filters as you want, go back and change the attributes for that filter, and at any time change what position they come in, at what time they come in, and you're never actually destroying the image. So right here I got this little image, and when I'm going to go up to my filter menu, and you see that my first choice up here is convert to smart filters. There's all the regular filters, but that first choice is now convert to smart filters. So I'm going to choose that. Click OK, and now this became a smart filter layer. And you notice in the layers palette, it's got this little icon there. So I'm going to keep that palette open and apply a filter to this. Let's go in here and let's say we give it some noise. Let's say add noise of about maybe, let's do about 18.92. Click OK. And maybe I want to do a little Gaussian blur to that. Let's do a little Gaussian blur of about maybe, let's say 4.1. And maybe we'll do a little facet to that. Let's do a little pixelate facet. Do a little facet. Now, the facet just kind of roughened it up a little bit. But you know, it would be nice if the noise was there. Look over here in the palette now. You see how it's showing up the filters? They look kind of like layer styles. So the add noise would have been nice to have after the blur. So I can simply take that and move it up above the Gaussian blur. And now we see that the noise appears before the Gaussian blur. Now, that's a little not enough. I'm going to double click on that, right? And that's going to bring me into the add noise dialog box, which has the exact number that I added before. So I can go in there and give it more or give it less. Let's give it a little less there. Click OK. So now we have a little less noise. I can go into the Gaussian blur and give it a little more. Let's just go in there and give it a little more of a blur. See, so we have all these things, and at any time I can turn one off. Let's turn the noise off. I just turn off the eye for it, and it turned it off. And the beauty of it is if I turn off the entire smart filters, you can see that the original image has not been destroyed in any way. So that's a really cool feature that you can now go in there and apply filters and they don't destroy the actual image. And you can go in there and re-edit those filters, change their position, do anything you want to them, and you're not destroying the image. Another cool feature is the ability to go in there and refine your selection edge. I'm going to go in here and make a little selection right here. Let's take Marty's face. I'm just going to do my lasso and select right around his face like that. Now, remember feather? And look under select. Feather used to live right here, right above modify. Feather still exists. It's under modify. See, it's down here. So if you just want a feather. But the new feature up here is called refine edge. I'm going to click on that. Brought me into this little window here. So what's happening now is that I have the ability to go in there and play around with that edge of my selection. I can view it like this against a white background. I can view it like this against a background. I can see it as a quick mask. I can see it just as the selection itself, or I can see it as an alpha channel. Let's see it against white. So we can really see a nice differentiation of the edges. I have a feather here. So I can go in there and start to apply a feather, and I'm actually seeing the amount of feather. Before, you apply the feather and the little marching ants maybe changed a little, maybe they got a little smoother. They didn't really go in there and get the kind of effect that we want. Now we can actually see the amount of feather that you're adding to this. We can expand it or contract it. And we're seeing the amount of contraction and expansion right here as a visual guide. I can set up contrast so I get a harder edge there, or bring that down, play with the radius so I'm going to get a softer edge along the edges, and so on. I can smoothen the edge so that if I have a rough edge, I can smoothen it out even more so I get a softer edge to this object. Let's bring down the feather and play around with the smooth, and we can see the little tiny sharp edges are getting smoother. So I have the ability to go in here and play around with my selection so that when I see exactly what I want, I can click OK. There's my selection. I can say, let's send this over to a new layer via copy. And when we turn off the background there, we see that we have the exact effect that we wanted before. Now, another new feature, which is really cool, is this one here, video layers. I'm going to say, give me a new blank video layer or a new video layer from a file. So, coming from a file, and I have here one of my own shows, a little Pixelperfect show. There it is. It comes in right in the upper corner, right there like that. Now, the window for animation, right here, now has a timeline, as you can see. There's the old version that had the little thumbnails, but I have a timeline version. So as I move my timeline, we can see that there's a little video showing up. There's the show, right? But the fact that it's a layer allows us to do things to that little video clip. Like for instance, I can go in there and double click on the layer and give it a layer style, like a little outer glow, which I'll go and make it much bigger and a little stronger. I can even give it a little bevel and emboss, which I'm going to make much stronger, make it a chisel hard, make the light coming from this side, make the size a little bigger like that, and go and do all the kind of stuff we want to do. Let's make a nice golden color for the bottom frame, put that in screen mode. So we see a nice little golden along the bottom, click OK. It's a layer, so what do you say we warp it? Let's go in there and do a little transform, warp. Okay, and I'm going to twist this like that, and twist this like this, and bring this one in here like that, and maybe do a little twirl like that. Bring this one down, and do a little twirl like this, and let's really accent that little curve right in there. Let that happen, and when I go ahead and play this, we're going to see that our little video is going to be playing inside of that warped, and all the nice little effects happening there. It's just a little slow as it's burning into memory there, and let's just push it along. So we can see there is the video, and we can see that it's playing at the angles and the transforms that we just made with the layer styles on top of it. They've done a lot of other changes to the program. There's a few things that have been enhanced a bit. Like for instance, we go into, let's open up a file that we have some images to. Let's open up, actually let's open up that same piece we had a second ago. Let's go back here, get me and Marty. And we do like the adjustments, like we go into curves. They've changed the curves dialog box. It's starting to look a little more like the levels as well, because we now have a histogram in there, so we can start applying all kinds of effects using curves. In a couple of weeks, I'm going to do an episode where that dialog box is going to be crucial for creating an effect. So I'm going to cancel out of this right now, and let's see a couple of other things in here. One thing that I really enjoy is the enhancements to the photo merge. Now, if you use photo merge for creating nice panoramas, it's a little quirky, especially since, let's just say you're standing outside and you shoot this nice little 180, right? And the sun's in a different spot, right? It's over here. You're shooting here, it's focusing for a certain light source. As you get closer to the sun, your focus starts to change, the aperture and all. So what happens is when you stitch these guys together, you're going to get these funny changes in the sky. Also, let's just say you don't have an adjustable lens or anything like that. It's just a point and shoot. You're going to get distortion along the way. Photo merge right now will not compensate for that distortion. So you get little tweaks happening to the image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Automate and go down to Photo Merge, and right off the bat you see that the dialog box has changed. There's different ways in which the objects will be merged together. You have a perspective, you have the auto, which is going to do whatever it needs to do to adjust those images. It's got a perspective, cylindrical, reposition only, and an interactive layout where you can move things around. Well, I'm going to leave the auto. I'm going to leave it auto, and I'm going to tell it to go ahead and browse for my files. And in here, I have a series of files. So I'm going to select all these files, and it's just a little panorama, and say open. There they are. They show up in my list, and I say OK and do it. So now it's going to go in there and open up the files, and it's going to merge them together. Now in the end result, you're going to see that it's an extremely smooth transition. Here it goes. And it's putting them in a timeline as well, as you can see down below. Align selected layers based on content. Here it comes. And there's my panorama. Now you notice the consistency of the sky, and you look at the edges, you see how they got rounded and they got tilted in? They have been distorted so that they compensated for any place where there was a shift in the angle because of my lens that couldn't be adjusted. So they went in there and did little bends and little skews to make the picture blend in together. Notice my sky is one continuous smooth flow. I don't have, since the sun is right here, I would have had a very sharp change in the sky, whereas now it's created a nice smooth focus all the way across the image. So they've added that feature to a few other areas of Photoshop where you can line up layers and so on. So it's a lot that's been added to the CS3. Of course, it also works on the Intel-based Macs, which has been a tremendous speed difference. I've been running tests between the two machines, between the two programs, the old CS2 and CS3, and it's remarkable how much faster and efficient things are. In the next few weeks, and in fact from now until CS4, I'm going to be doing everything in CS3. So along the way, you'll start seeing more and more of these new features. I hope you got something out of this. I would say go out now and upgrade. It's worth the upgrade. And if you have an Intel-based Mac, it's a no-brainer. You have to go out and get it. It's going to run a lot faster and a lot better for you. I'd like to thank my sponsors, GoDaddy.com, and at this point I'm going to read because I don't have a script. I don't have a thing going in front of me here. So I have to read. So it's going to sound kind of phony, but no, these are real honest words here. Okay? Get reliable, secure web hosting without a long-term contract. Without a long-term contract. GoDaddy's hosting plans are bigger and better than ever, with 99% uptime, free 24/7 support, and no annual commitment. Best of all, plans start at $3.99 a month. Plus, enter a code PERFECT, like the one you see right here, when you check out and save an additional $5 off any order of $30 or more. Some restrictions apply. See site for details. Get your piece of the internet at GoDaddy.com. Hope you learned something. Remember to play. That's the best way to learn this stuff, is sit there and play. Don't think of it as work. Think of it as play. See you in the next show.
Hey there, Jay Adelson, CEO of Revision 3. I was hoping that I could just ask a small favor of you to go to revision3.com/survey and spend just a couple minutes of your time answering just a couple questions. It's completely optional and anonymous to help us get to know you, the fans, a little bit better so that we can improve our programming. Again, it'll be the least painful survey you've ever taken, and it'll help us a great deal. Thanks for your support.
Hi, and welcome to Pixelperfect with me, Bert Monroy, the show where I show you all kinds of Photoshop tricks. I want to thank my sponsors, GoDaddy.com, the guys who will host your website, set up your domain name, and even design a site for you. And if you enter a code, Pixel, like the one right there on your screen right now, when you check out, of your .com domain name, you can have it for just $6.95 a year. It's an incredible deal. Some restrictions apply. All that stuff is on their website. So go to GoDaddy.com for all your internet needs. Today's show, I want to talk about something that a lot of people asked, especially Joel Heimbau and Peter Heinrichsen. They want to see Chrome. They want to see Chrome text in particular. Now, when you look around, you see a lot of signs with Chrome text, especially car ads and games. They all have this nice, shiny Chrome text. Well, that's what I'm going to do for you today. Right here on the screen, I have this nice big blank screen. And yes, I'm back in CS2. I'm going to play around with it here. A lot of you maybe didn't upgrade yet, so I want to show you these things so that you'll understand it right off the bat and you'll see the kind of screens that you're used to seeing. In the near future, I'm going to completely switch to CS3, so I think you should go out there and do that upgrade soon. All right, so right here on the screen, I'm going to type in some text. I'm going to put my cursor right here in the center, and I'm going to type in Pixelperfect. I don't know why I came up with that, but that sounds like a good thing to use for a sign. Right there, I'm going to center it right in the middle there. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and rasterize that because I know it looks good. I know I spelt it right, so I'm going to say rasterize the type, so it turned it into actual pixels. Now, in a layer on top of this, right above it, I'm going to create a big rectangle that's just going to encompass my words, just like so. Let's center it right about like that. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stroke this. I'm going to stroke this, and I'm going to give it a 30. Let's try a 30, because a width of 30 pixels should be just about the width of the letters on the screen. I'm going to say on the outside. Go ahead and do it, and it gave me this nice big fat stroke. That looks good. I'll deselect it, and I'm going to merge this down. I'm going to say merge down. So the two of them become a single layer. Now, holding on my command key, control on the PC, I'm going to click on the preview icon to turn it into a selection. You see the selection? I'm going to say save selection. Saving the selection turns it into an alpha channel. I'm going to deselect it, and let's go see the alpha channel. Right here in the channels palette, there we see the layer, or rather the channel. Now I have two because I was practicing before, so I'm going to throw the other one away, and alpha 2. So there we see Pixelperfect. I'm going to give it a little blur, just to soften up those edges a little bit. So I'm going to give it a Gaussian blur. Go in here and give it a Gaussian blur of about 5. That sounds good, just to soften up the little edges along the sides. Click OK. Go back to my RGB, and in my layers, I'm going to create a layer above the little logo, and I'm going to go ahead and fill that with a 50% gray. That's a nice neutral density. Click OK. There's my 50% gray. To this layer of 50% gray, I'm going to give it another filter, Render Lighting Effects. Now, lighting effects, I have the ability to create these nice little spotlights, right? So I'm going to go in here, and let's bring this light source a little further in, and I got this nice effect happening right in there. And right now, it's just creating a spotlight on the gray. But way down here at the bottom of this window, I have a little thing that says Texture Channel. I can use a channel as a mask for this effect. So I'm going to choose that alpha 2. That's the channel that I created a second ago. I'm going to use that. And right here in the preview, we see that we now see the shadows and highlights of the Pixelperfect with the square around it being lit up by the little spotlights. I click OK, and there's the effect. Now, right now it looks like a little vacuum formed plastic, right? We want to make it look like chrome. So I'm going to go into one of my adjustments. I'm going to go into curves. Now, last show when I introduced CS3, I showed you how this window had changed. It had a histogram. Well, there's the window that you should have in your machines today. What I'm going to do is I'm going to reposition colors. I'm going to push this guy way up there like that, which created this whole effect. Now I'm going to create by just clicking on the little line here, I'm going to pull out another little handle, bring it down, and another one going up, and another one going down. I'm basically creating this little roller coaster kind of an effect that we see right there on the screen. I'm going to accent these a little more, and we can see what's starting to happen. It's starting to look like chrome back there. It's giving it that shininess. So I got all the effects that I want, just like that. That looks good. I click OK. There's my effect. So now, I'm going to go ahead and clip this with the actual logo. So I'm going to hold down my my Option key, which is Alt on a PC, because right now you see the little hand going up and down the little palette here. Let's bring it in, see? But when I hold down that modifier key, that Option key, it's going to change that behavior. So now, you see when it goes between two layers, it has that little cursor change. I described this in an earlier episode, and what's happening here is I'm creating a clipping group. So I'm going to click between those, and now you can see that the chrome is visible inside the letters. I'm going to go into the layer styles for the letters themselves and give them a little stroke themselves. Right there, little stroke on the outside, but not red. I'm going to give it a nice black. And not 3, let's go down to about 1. So it's just a little tiny hint of a line, just to separate that from the background, right there. And a little more, I'm going to give it a little drop shadow, just a tiny little drop shadow, which I'll increase the distance ever so slightly, and click OK. So now we have this nice effect happening there. Now in my background, I'm going to go to my background here, and I got black. I'm going to choose a nice blue for my background color. And in the background, I'm going to throw a little gradient, little radial gradient straight up and down from black to blue, like that. So we have some little color in the back. Now we're starting to really see this chrome effect. So now on a layer on top of all these, I'm going to go in there and add a little sparkle. So I'm going to return my colors to black and white, make white the foreground, and I'm going to get my paintbrush. And let's get a small brush. Let's say a 13, that's a good size, maybe a little bigger. Let's go with the 17, which gives us that little effect like that. In my brush engine, right up here, I'll pull it out. I'm going to turn off my shape dynamics, but I'm going to go down to other dynamics and say, give it a fade. Let it fade out. Right now I got 250, that might be a little too much. Oh yeah, that's much too much. So let's bring that down to say 25. Let's see what that's going to be like. That's pretty good. Maybe we'll make it 35. 35. All right, let's put that back in the well. And I'm going to click right here in the little corner of the L. I'm going to click right there, come up in this direction right here, hold down my shift key to constrain it from click to click, and click. I get this nice little streak that ran out of pixels or ran out of brush tips at 35 steps. I'm going to go back to the original point, click again, come in the opposite direction, hold down the shift key, and click. There I get a little line going that way. Go back into my little brush palette and say, let's make it 18 now. 18. Click in the same spot again, right there. Come at an angle perpendicular to the other two strokes, hold down the shift key, and click. Click in the original spot, go straight above on the opposite side, shift, click. And there's this nice little tiny sparkle right on the end of my text. I can duplicate that. And let's move this one over to, say, right here at the top of the P. And we have these nice little sparkles. Now, if you want to add a little reflection to this, we could. Let's just say I go ahead and open up another image here. And I have an image, let's just say right down here. I got a little image from San Francisco, little painted ladies. And let's just drag this right into our scene. Here it is. Now, I'm going to scale this so that it encompasses the entire scene. So let's go in here and do a little scale. I'm holding down my shift key to constrain it. And there we go. So we have this nice big scene here. And I'm going to clip that with the letters too. So I'm going to come down here and clip it right in there. Now it's kind of obliterated our text, so we can kind of bring down the opacity for that layer. Just bring it down so it's just a little hint of a little reflection. And let's just move it up so we get the reflection inside the other. And there we see that we have this nice little chrome text with little sparkles and a little reflection from some scene outside of the logo. I hope you learned something there. Remember, it's all the little steps in between. Now, little tweaks here and there will give you totally different effects. It's up to you to find these by sitting there and playing. That's the best way to learn is to sit there and play. Don't think of it as work, think of it as playing. Hope you learned something today. See you in the next show. Hi, and welcome to Pixelperfect with me, Bert Monroy, where I show you all kinds of Photoshop tricks and whatever else comes to mind. I want to thank my sponsors, GoDaddy.com, that make it possible for me to be here. And they have all kinds of specials going on. I'm going to read them from a piece of paper here because I don't have a script that I'm reading there. It says, get $96 in free extras with your domain name from GoDaddy.com. Each domain includes free hosting with a website builder, a free blog, complete email, and much more. Plus, if you enter the code PIXEL, like right there you see on the screen, when you check out and get your .com domain name, it'll be just $6.95 a year. Go check them out, GoDaddy.com. Those are the guys who will take care of all your internet needs. Now, I want to handle a little subject here that a lot of people requested. That is water reflections. I got requests from Mark McClure and Ben Matthew, Jan Winther, Gregory Warner, Debbie, and even Greg Mefford, who wanted reflections and so on. So I'm going to handle water reflections. I'm going to handle 3 different kinds. One when you're really close, one when you're a little further away, and one when you're really far away. Because in each case, the reflections in the water are going to be handled differently. They're going to be created differently, and they're going to look differently. So let's start with the really close by. I'm going to start over with a totally blank canvas. And on this blank canvas, I'm going to throw in a nice little tone. Let's get a gray here for my foreground. For my background, a darker gray. And with my gradient tool, I'm just going to throw in a gradient just like that. All right? Now, I'm going to add a little dividers on the sidewalk. So with my line tool here, I'm going to get my line tool and set to create pixels. I'm going to create a little line that goes across like that. And another one that goes across like that. And I might want to add a couple of little cracks to the sidewalk. So with a little tiny brush, I'm going to go in here and draw a little crack going right through there. Make a thinner brush and have another little crack going down, maybe one right through here. Just little cracks in the sidewalk. Now I'm going to add a little nuance to this tone. I'm going to give it a little filter. Now if I wanted to just create a concrete sidewalk, I'd give it sandstone in Texturizer. But this is going to be covered with water because we need water reflections, right? So I'm going to give it a little noise. Add noise. And just give it a little bit, just enough, about like that. In fact, let's go even lower. Let's do a 15. That should be enough. Okay, that kind of looks like stone, but it's that randomization that's going on in that gray right now with all those little black and gray marks in it. That's going to give me the effect that I need in my next filter, which is going to create a glaze of water over the sidewalk. And that filter that I'm going to use is way down here in Artistic. We have a little thing called Plastic Wrap. Now, by the name, it kind of tells you what's going to happen. It's going to kind of wrap things with plastic, which is going to create little shines, little glows, and so on. But because of all that noise, it's going to have a pebbly effect. So I go into the dialog box. There it is. I can make the highlight a little stronger, and so on. Maybe make it a little smoother. And when I got it the way I want it, I click OK, and now I got this nice little effect going on here. Now, into this, I'm going to throw this. This is a perfect scene as a reflection. We're looking down onto the sidewalk, so we're going to see things reflected. This scene is perfect because we're looking up. And since we're looking into the pool, which is down below, all reflections will be looking up. So I'm going to drag this guy right into the scene, right in there like that, put him in position, and I'm going to do a little flip vertical on this, or rotate 180, either one. There it is. Let's throw it away now. We don't need it. And I'm going to give this a filter. And that's one of the typical water filters, which is under Distort. I have a little thing called Ripple. And Ripple, I'm going to kind of pump it up quite a bit there, get a lot of ripples, click OK. Now I got all these little ripples happening. And I'm going to change the mode to something like Hard Light. So it's going to interact with the background and bring down the opacity. So now I got this little reflection in the water, right? And on top of this, we're going to add a little drop. So I'm going to create a little circle right about here. And I got that black for my foreground color. Let's pick one of these deep grays. Like let's pick this deep gray right in here. And I'm going to throw a couple of tones because right now you see inside the selected circle, there's not much going on there. Not much for the filter that I'm going to use to work with. So now I'm going to get a nice large brush. That's a good size. And let's see, we'll just draw a couple little strokes right into this area here. Let's merge this down. Merge down. Okay, and we'll throw a little dark tone. In fact, let's make it even darker. Let's go in here, pick almost black there, and throw a little dark tone in there, a little dark there, maybe a little more right into this area here. And let's pick a blue, because we're going to reflect the sky that's out of view right now. So let's pick a blue, kind of like a deep muted blue like this, and we'll just throw a little blue and a little blue, some blues into that area. Now comes that next filter, which is under Distort. We have Zigzag, which has a feature called Pond Ripples. See? I'm going to increase the amount of ripples and the amount of ridges. And when I click OK, I have this nice little drop of water that's fallen from someplace out of view. Okay, now let's step away a little bit. We got this scene here. Kind of jumped ahead there. We've got this scene now. Now we're standing a little further away. And what I'm going to do in a new layer right here, I'm going to create a long kind of a rectangle right here. A long rectangle just like that. And with my elliptical selection tool, I'm going to add, with my shift key, add a little circle to the top. So it has a kind of a curvature to it, just like that. All right, and we're in the layer, so let's pick some colors for this new effect here. So let's pick a nice light gray and a dark gray. Kind of like before. And this time I'm going to take a gradient tool with a reflective gradient and throw a little gradient right into here. Just like that. All right, so deselect that. I'm going to kind of break up the bottom there with a little tiny airbrush, rather a little eraser. I'm just going to break up the bottom down here so it looks like it's being rippled in the water there, just down below there like that. Okay, I'm going to duplicate that layer. And the duplicate, I'm going to do a little rotate on it, 180. And I'm going to bring it down all the way down here, and actually the 180 didn't work in this case. You see that? Because it put the highlight on the wrong side, so let's just do a flip horizontal on that. So now they line up. That works better. Now I'm going to give this guy that same filter that I gave it a second ago. I'm going to go in there and say distort ripple. All right, and then we have this effect. Let's make it even bigger and click OK. So now we got these little ripples going on in there. I can bring down the opacity a little bit. Now, one more thing has to happen here. First of all, I put it in back of the pole so we don't get this stuff showing up on the bottom there. And we need the waves to show through. We need some of these little ripples here that are facing us rather than the pole, because the water is acting like a little mirror and it's ripples. So on one side you're going to see reflection, the other side you won't. So I'm going to go into the layer styles for that layer. And down here in the blend if modes, for the underlying layer, that's the stuff underneath, I'm going to say, don't hide these particular dark tones. And you're going to see they're going to start to come through. Here they come, right through there, right there like that. Now they're kind of hard edged, so I'm going to hold down my Option key and split the slider. Split the slider so I can get these nice little softer edges happening. And there we go like that. Click OK, and now we have a reflection in the water that looks realistic. All right, so that's looking good. Now, far away. Now we're really pulling back, and we added an extra little feature, nighttime. But that's not going to deter us in any way. Daytime, nighttime, this effect is going to be the same. Let's go in here, and you see I have a little channel already set up for the water area. So I'm going to turn that into a selection and do an inverse so that my buildings are selected. I'm going to say send it to a new layer via copy. Now, in this case, I'm going to take that new layer and do a flip vertical and drag it down so that it's right below the original buildings like that. Now, I'm going to bring down the opacity for that layer. I'm going to bring it down a little bit. Now here we have a whole different situation. What do these kind of reflections look like? When you get that far away, you're not going to see the little ripples there. You're not going to see little breaks. You're not going to see things being rippled. I can't use the ripple filter because it's going to look like a tidal wave going on there. So here's a case where when you look far away like that, things get streaked. They get streaked. So the perfect filter for this is my motion blur filter. The motion blur filter in a totally vertical position, let's set that to 90 right there and increase my distance quite a bit. And I click OK. Now we see that we have the proper reflections. But we do need those little ripples, which don't exist here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the channel for the water. I'm going to load it on itself and fill that with a nice 50% gray. I'm going to give it some noise. Add noise. Give it a lot of noise. A lot of noise like that. All right? So now that we have this noise, I'm going to give that a motion blur, because what is the little water ripples? They're a bunch of little scraggly lines, and right now I just have a lot of noise. So I'm going to give it a little motion blur. A motion blur again, except this time I'm going to go perfectly horizontal and a little distance of about maybe 5. Let's go with a 5. See? Click OK. Now I'm going to go into my levels, and in levels I'm going to kind of lessen the amount of that noise. See, so I'm just going in there and moving these guys around, so I got a nice little effect like this going right through there like that. Click OK, deselect, go back to my RGB and load that. Command click on it, there we see that. Let's hide the little marching ants. It's kind of like an animation. Let's just hide the little marching ants. And in the layer on top of this, I'm going to fill it with black. See, you filled it right through that area. And I could also go in there and take a paintbrush, and let's pick up this green from here and a larger brush, and I'll just throw in a couple of little greens along the shoreline through here and in here where we have some greens. And let's pick up this orange, and we'll throw a little bit of the orange in there, and through here, and right in there, and right in here. And let's pick up that green again, and throw a little green right in front of here. And there you see it. So now we have 3 different water reflections. Real close, using the ripple filter. A little further away, using a combination of filters and layer styles. And then from far away, a totally different set of filters that have nothing to do with water. But they give you the effect that I want. I've mentioned many times, it's not what something is called, it's what it does. In this case, I used motion blur in 2 different instances, and neither time did I actually use it for motion. I used it first to create the streaks that gave me the right reflection, and then little horizontal streaks that gave me the little ripples in the water. Remember to play. The best way to learn this is to play. Don't think of it as work, think of it as play. Hope you learned something today. Hope to see you in the next show. Hello and welcome to Pixel Perfect with me, Bert Monroy, the show where I show you all kinds of Photoshop tricks. I want to thank my sponsors, GoDaddy.com, the guys who will host your website, take care of your domain name, and even design the site for you. And they're around, and they have a 99% uptime, and they're free 24/7 support. And the best of all, most of their plans start at $3.99 a month. If you enter the code PERFECT, like you see right here on the screen, when you check out and you can save an additional $5 off of any order of $30 or more. It's incredible details. I would say give them a call. Drop them a line, and go to GoDaddy.com for all your internet needs. Now, here we are. I'm going to talk about the really bizarre and kind of a strange effect that quite a few people asked for. I got Anthony Lipari, Michael D. Prospo, Will Skillen. In fact, about 3 of you actually sent me the exact same sample image, which I have on the screen right now. This image here, 3 of you sent me the exact same thing and said, could you do this on the screen? Well, the girl, and she's kind of very pixelated, or not even pixelated, but vectorized. In a future show, I'm going to show that. I'm going to actually create comic book effects, but that's somewhere down the line. Things are changing now with the whole CS3 line being released. So I'm going to cover her later, but I am going to deal with the swirls. Everybody wants to know about these particular swirls that are just going all around her, and that flow. See the word flow there? It's all kind of like nice little tiny lines. Let's go look at it. It's very little kind of like star field, and these big lines going all over the place. Well, the lines, let's start with that. Let's start with all these little flowing swirls all around her. That is actually something that is better done in Illustrator. Illustrator is the tool for that particular effect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shoot over here to Illustrator and show you where I'm going to create that. I'm going to pull back a little bit here, and I'm going to create a series of swirls. Now, this is where that blend tool comes in. I talked about the blend tool a long time ago in an earlier show, and I'm going to show it to you again. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to create a couple of swirls. I'm going to create this little swirl that comes up here like this, and comes down here and closes off, just like that. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select this guy. I got the line selected here, and I'm going to take the rotation tool, and I'm going to click right here, right there, right below it. And holding down my Option key to create a copy, I'm going to go ahead and rotate that. And it's creating a second swirl just below it. See, just like that. I'm going to bring it over just a little like that. And maybe we'll just modify it ever so slightly. So I'm going to go in here and grab this last line, and I'm just going to grab this point and pull it out like so, and just kind of curve it in like that. So we have this slight variation there between these two. And I'll tell you what, we'll do another thing to it. We'll select both of them, and that stroke right now, they're filled with white. Let's give it no fill, and the stroke, let's make it a nice blue, like say this blue right here. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to I have both of them selected, all the points, and I'm going to go to my blend tool. That's this guy right here. I double-clicked on it to bring up the options, and I'm going to say, choose a specified number of steps. And I'm going to give it, let's give it 16 steps. That's going to give us a lot of little lines in between. And I click OK. And then I click from one endpoint to the other endpoint, and it's going to create all the steps in between, from one to the other. And I created all these little lines in between. I can now do a select all and copy that. Go back over here to my Photoshop file. Go to Photoshop, and I'm going to create a new file. Let's get a brand new image here. It's going to reflect what's in the keyboard. Let's make this a little bigger. Let's make this 1000 by 800. And we'll make it RGB. Click OK. And there it is. I'm going to invert this, make it black, and then paste. I'm going to paste right into that and paste it as pixels. Click OK. There's my little squirrel, which I'm going to commit. And let's just go to full screen here. And I got my little squirrel, which I can make bigger. So I'm going to go in there and just play with this. I'm going to scale this. Let's scale them so that it's just coming right off the page, just like that. So there's a set of squirrels. Now, I could go back to Illustrator. And in Illustrator, we can actually do different colors here, too. Let's just take all these and dump them. And what I'll do is I'll create another set that's going to go in this direction. I'll curve like that. And just let's get this out of the way and have it coming out through here. Let's pull out this handle a little bit so it's a nice long shape like that. All right, and just like I did before, I'm going to select the whole thing and make a little rotation from right here. Option button to copy it and make a little rotation that way. There we go. But what we're going to do this time is we're going to take this second line and we're going to fill that one with a red stroke. And again, I'm going to select both. And again, with the same amount for my blend, I'm going to click from one to the other, and it creates all the steps in between, which not only the shapes, but in this case, the color as well. So I'm going to copy that, come back over to my Photoshop, and I'm going to paste that one as pixels. There's the second one. And did I copy that? That becomes a user error at that point. Let's see, select all, copy, got to make sure you copy. And then we go back into Photoshop, and let's try that paste again. Paste as pixels. There it is. That's better. And I'm going to go in there and do a little scaling on this one. So let's scale this up here and scale this down all the way out of the scene like that. So now we got these two sets of squirrels. Now, they have to have some nice glows to them, right? So I'll tell you what, I'm going to put the reddish ones in the back, and I'm going to go into my layer styles and just give them a little glow, a little outer glow. Just a little glow, which I'll make a little bigger, like so. And maybe a little stronger. And click OK. That's good enough. Now, the blue one. I'm going to give that a nice little outer glow. The outer glow in this case will be a nice soft blue. Click OK, and that's pretty good. Now I'm going to duplicate that blue one. I'm going to duplicate the blue one, have a second one. The second one that's on top, I'm going to lock the transparency and fill it with white. See, so now I got a white one on top of the blue one. What I'm going to do to that second one is I'm going to give that a layer mask. Give that one a little layer mask, little reveal all so it's white, and using black and a nice big paintbrush, I'm going to go in there and just start to paint certain areas where I'm going to hide the white one, exposing the blue one underneath. See, just like that. So now I've got this nice little effect of white on top of the blue, so we're getting this nice kind of weird effect. Now comes that glowing kind of starry text. In this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer, use my pen tool here. And I'm just going to create a nice little piece of text. And let's just say we're going to create, let's just say the word flow, just like they had. So I'm going to create a nice little effect like this. All right, that's going to be one letter. All right, and I'm going to create a little L right through here, like so. And the reason I'm going to do it as a path instead of just actually doing it by hand, which makes it so easy on my Wacom Cintiq, is because I'm going to apply different strokes to this. So by having a path, it guides all my nice little brushes when I start to apply those. So here I'm going to create a little O, give a little curl around right through here like that, come up here and create a little W. That's going to go up like that, come back down, make the little bottom part of the W, a little curl like this, and have it just go shoot off like that. So here, now we have this nice little path. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, with that white, I'm going to get my paintbrush, and I'm going to get one of the spatter brushes, like this one right here, which right now is going to create this streak. So I'm going to go into my brush engine, and in the brush engine, I'm going to give it a little spacing like that. And I'm going to go in there and in shape dynamics, I'm going to turn off pen pressure, but I'm going to change the little size and change the angle of all those little guys. See, so now it starts to look more like that kind of an effect. So now that I have that, I'm going to go in, and on that layer, I'm going to take that with the paintbrush and stroke that path with the white. And there we see that nice effect. Now, I'm going to get a larger brush, much larger brush, and stroke it again. But this time I'm going to bring down the opacity a little bit, so it's not so strong, and stroke it again. So now it's got another effect on the outside. And maybe now I'll make it really, let's stroke it one more time. There we go. And now a much smaller brush, and stroke it a third time, or fourth time in this case, so I get it a little solid towards the middle. I can now turn off that little path, and back in my layer, I can go into the layer styles for that, and give that a little outer glow, which we're going to soften the effect, and just make it a little stronger, a little larger, so it has this nice little glow going through it, and there we see the effect. We have the swirls that we created using Illustrator to create a couple of little swirls, a little variation on those swirls, and then blend from one to the other to create all the steps in between. Then we created our text using the pen tool to create some nice little text the way we wanted it, and then we stroked those with a brush, and those created all the effects that we see in the scene here. Let's go back to our original. There we go. We see the text that's flowing, and these little guys at the end, they're like little stars. Let's put those too. Why not, right? So right in here, let's go and get a small dot brush, like this 9 right here, which right now creates a little stripe. Let's make it solid. Let's bring it up to solid, and let's put it in another layer so we can play around with it just in case. And in the brush engine, we're going to go in there and give it a lot of spacing like that. And in shape dynamics, we'll turn that off. We'll give it a little size jitter, give it a little scattering. Let's scatter them a little more, like that. There we go. And now, at the very ends here, we'll start to throw little wisps of little extra little toys, little dots at the very ends of our little strokes. So there you see now little variations on those techniques going to give you other effects. It's a question of going in there and playing. That's the best way to learn, is to sit there and play. Hope you learned something from today's show. See you next week. Hi, and welcome to Pixelperfect with me, Bert Monroy, a show where I show you all kinds of Photoshop stuff. I want to thank my sponsors, GoDaddy.com. I want to start with them and tell you that they have a special going on, that if you type in Pixel, like you see right here on the screen, when you check out and get your .com domain name, you can get it for just $6.95 a year. That's a really cool special. So do me a favor, go over to GoDaddy.com for all your internet needs. They will host your website, set up your domain name, and they'll even design the site for you. So check them out at GoDaddy.com. Right now I want to do a bunch of requests. And one of them deals with 3D text. Justin Van Genderen, I hope I got that right. Bob Moniz actually gave me a page from one of my books and told me if I could do what I did in the book on the screen. And Mike Ash, just to mention a few, there's a lot of you out there who wanted to see 3D text. Now, you do have the ability to extrude text in Illustrator, but I'm going to do the whole thing in Photoshop. Because the idea of Photoshop using 3D is a little bizarre, because Photoshop and Illustrator are both 2D programs. They don't actually have the third dimension built into them. They emulate the third dimension with a lot of cool little tricks, but it's not true 3D. In fact, when you apply a three-dimensional effect or extrusion to things in Illustrator, it's handling individual objects. It doesn't really have a focal plane where everything is going to fit into the same dimension. So it's a 2D space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some text and give it a 3D look. Now, there are a couple of examples that they used, and one of the examples that some of the people used was one of my own pieces, which I'm going to show you here. It's a little piece called Hamburgers. And that's something that they used a lot to explain what they wanted to see. And here, there's a difference to the 3D text. First, it's extruded, and also it's hollow. The text is hollow. Right here on the screen, we see the word hamburgers. And I'm going to zoom in on the little H and A here. And we see that the text has a depth to it, and it's hollow. The letters are actually empty inside, and there's a neon tube inside. So there's all these different areas that create that illusion of the third dimension, to create the illusion of depth and actual shape. So that's what I'm going to recreate for you here from scratch. Now I'm going to start with my text tool, and right here in the middle, I'm going to type in yo. That's good enough right there, the word yo. Now, you can tell I'm an ex-New Yorker by the words I use. All right, so what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to skew it into the third dimension. But before I do that, I know I spelt it right. I'm going to go ahead and rasterize this. So I'm going to go in here to my layers palette, go to rasterize and say rasterize the type, which turns it into actual pixels. So now I'm going to distort this into the third dimension. To do that, I'm going to use the transform distort. I'm going to pull this side out, pull this side over like that, pull this side down here, and pull this one over like that. So there we have this nice 3D text. Now we need to give it some depth. So I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm going to duplicate it again. I'm going to have 3 of them. I'm going to turn off the eye on the bottom one, but this one here I'm going to move over. I'm going to move this one down just about like that. All right, so I have this extra little angle here. I'm going to shrink it down a little bit. I'm going to scale that. I'm going to scale that one just a little bit because it's a little further away, so it's going to get a little smaller. So I'm just going to do a little uniform scale like that. I'm holding down my shift key to constrain the scale and put it right about like that. That's as far down as I want this to be. Click OK and make it happen. So now I'm going to go in here and I'm going to duplicate that one too. I have extras. Let's turn off the eye for the duplicates. Now I'm going to take the top one and I'm going to reduce the opacity a little bit so I can see through it. Just like that. And before I even do that, I'm going to give it a color too. Let's go in there and lock the transparency, and let's get a nice red. All right? And I'm going to go ahead and fill that with red. So I got this nice red text. So now I can really see what's underneath it there. Okay? So now I see the red on top of the black ones. So what I'm going to do is create the shapes that are the sides of these letters. To do that, I'm going to use my pen tool. Now, using the bottom one as a guide, I'm going to go in here and create little vectors that are going to encompass those side shapes, just like that. See, I'm going to give myself a little bleed, there like that. Then I'm going to do the bottom part down here, right through there, across, up, there, like that. Give it a little bleed. And this has to be moved down a little bit. We want it to be pretty accurate, so I'm going to just move those little handles down, just like that. And then I'm going to do this one up here. So I click there. Go right to meet it there, come here, and here I can give it a little extra space. There, those are the shapes that we need. The O pretty much has them except for right here. See that little corner there? So let's fill that in right there. I'm going to go in there right up to the top there, come out here. There, I got that little edge. Come over here, go up there, and give it that little edge. And again, I'm going to just go in here and finesse this so it's right on the edge, just like that, and like that. So there's those nice little shapes. So let's give that background color something else. Let's go back here, lock the transparency, and let's make that or let's just say we make a darker version of this red here. And go ahead and fill that. Okay, so we got that dark red down there. Now these little edges, I'm going to select those 2 paths. This one and this one. And in that same layer, I'm going to unlock the transparency and go ahead and fill those 2. I'm going to take that path and fill it. that filled up that little space right in there. See? So now we have a nice hard edge there. So now I got my paths. There's my paths. So in a layer above this, I'm going to create a new layer there, right there. And right there, I'm going to go in here and turn this path here into a selection and make an even darker version of this red. Let's go to, let's say, even darker like this. And take my path and go ahead and fill that right there, really dark. And it's behind there. When I bring back the opacity of the top one, you're going to see that edge, right? This one down here, I'm going to make it a black. I'm going to fill that one with black. That's the bottom part right there. And then this guy right here, let's go in there and let's use this same red in here. And let's go ahead and fill that with that red. All right, so now let's take our opacity for the top and bring it back up to 100%. Now we can see that we have depth to our letters. We can add additional things going on here. Like for instance, the O has no depth. The Y does, but the O doesn't. So in this background layer, I'm going to go in and add some tones. So I'm going to use my dodge and burn tools. So I'm going to get my dodge tool right here, and let's get a little bigger. And just kind of lighten that side right in there like that, and a little light right in here as well. Then my burn tool, get my burn tool, make it a little bigger, and I'm just hitting my open and close bracket keys. I'm going to darken the bottom down here. Darken it all the way down to black, just like the bottom of the Y, so I get this black down here, and the same thing up here. I'm going to darken that area right in there. Make it nice and dark. Those are the shadows. So now we see that the letters have some depth to them. So now what I need to do is to create the inside of these letters. There is an inside. There are cavities inside where we can put some neon or whatever we want to stick in there, right? We want to give these guys a little depth. We've created the 3D effect. We can add some shadows here. In fact, why don't we do that? We didn't do that yet. Let's give them some shadows. So let's go in here and take one of these that we have, and let's give this a little drop shadow. A little drop shadow right here. And we'll take that distance and move it over. And maybe turn it just a little bit at an angle. Click OK. Now you see that it looks good on the O, but it doesn't look very good on the Y because of the fact that right there, that just doesn't look right. So you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that drop shadow and separate it from the layer. So I'm going to come up here, go to Layer Styles, and say Create Layer, which will give me a separate layer for the drop shadow. So now here's that drop shadow. So now I can go in there and fill up this little area right in there. Right in there. Let's just select that little area and fill that with black. And we're going to soften that. Let's go and soften that so it'll be soft like the rest of the shadow. So there we see that a proper little shadow. Just that little angle is all it needed there to make that look right. Okay, so now what do we need? The cavities. I'm going to turn the letters on top into a selection, command clicking on them. And then I got these letters down here. These are the ones below. Let's just make sure that they're the right ones. Okay, nope, there's this one right here. That's the one, that's the original shadow. Yeah, and this is the one that's below, right there. Okay, so what I'm going to do, there it is. Let's turn these guys back on. Okay, I got that selected. I'm going to take this layer here, and with my command key and my option key press, that's Control and Alt, I'm going to click on it. Since I currently have a selection, when I option click on these with the command key, it's going to subtract from the selection. See? It's subtracted. So it gave me a selection that exposes those areas in there. Let's bring back our little sides. So now, in a layer on top of all this, I'm going to take those shapes and fill them with a color. Let's go in here and let's just say we pick this nice deep orange here, or this reddish color, and go ahead and fill that with that color. There's the insides of the letters now, which I have to do some modifications. So I'm going to take my lasso tool, and I'm just going to go in here and create this little selection right through there. Now, I could have very easily used the pen tool again, but I'm just going to use this. And go ahead and fill that. And down here, go in here and do that. Fill that. All right, and here's another one. Go ahead and fill that. Now I'm going to clip that. I'm going ahead and clip that. Let me deselect that. I'm going to clip that with the letters so I don't see those little guys sticking out. See, there they go. That's exactly what I want. Now I need to add some dimension to those. So in that layer, I'm going to take my burn tool and add some shading up in there and some shading down in here. Right in there like that. Up in here, like that. And I'm going to select these areas. I'm going to go right in here. I select this right through there. Come over to here. And we can select this right through there, like that. All right, and burn those. So they're really dark in there, and in there. So now I can add a little light to these. So with my dodge tool, I'll add a little highlight right there, and maybe a little highlight right through here, just to give it that little shape, and maybe a little highlight right in this edge, right through there. And we want to kind of segregate that so we get a hard edge, so let's just select that right through there. All right, and with that dodge tool, we'll go in there and add that. Now, there's a little shadow that's necessary there because we have that little shadow. Remember this shadow right down here? There's that shadow, so we need a little shadow in here. So I'm going to go in here and create a little shadow for myself. A little shadow that goes like this and across, just like that. And we'll add a little one right in here. Just in there like that. And in another layer, I'll go ahead and fill those with some black. Right in there. I'm going to go ahead and clip that. So they're visible inside there. And I might want to put them behind. So they're inside that little area in there. And bring down their opacity so it's not so strong. It's just a little hint of a little shadow back in there. Same thing in here. I might want to add a little shadow. Here I'm going to just go ahead and do it with a whole new path. We're just going to follow that curve. Come back in here and fill that with the black. There we go. We got these nice little shadows. We can soften them up, give them a little blur. Oh, we need one here too, don't we? So let's go in there and create this little shadow right in there like that. And go ahead and fill that with black. Now we can take that whole thing and just give it a little Gaussian blur, just to soften those up. And bring down their opacity a little bit more. Let's go to Layers Palette, lower their opacity just a little more so there's these little shadows inside. And now we see that we have these cavities. The letters are now three-dimensional. They have depth on the outside and on the inside. Now, I went pretty fast, but the beauty of this is that you can rewind it and see it again. It's just a question of establishing those dimensions. And I did that by having two different shapes. I had the first letters and I had the second set of letters right there. The two of them together were offset like that, and I used those as guides to create all the paths that I needed, all the little paths for all the shapes in between. And then when I put everybody together, we had this nice three-dimensional looking text. And let's not forget our little shadow, and there's our shadow. Hope you got something from that. It's a question of looking at things, studying how things work. You're not sure how something is going to look? Well, take a couple objects and hold them together, light them, and see how shadows work, see how things light them. In next week's show, I'm going to talk about shadows. I'm going to talk about some complicated shadows. Hope to see you then. Remember to play. It's the best way to learn. See you in the next show. Welcome to Pixelperfect with me, Bert Monroy, the show where I show you all kinds of Photoshop stuff. I want to thank my sponsors, GoDaddy.com. They have some cool specials for you if you enter the code PIXEL, like you see on the screen here. When you check out and get your .com domain name, it'll cost you only $6.95 a year, and that's an incredible deal. They will host your site, set up your domain name. They'll even design the site for you. So go check them out at GoDaddy.com. Now, answering questions time. I have a lot of people who ask me about shadows. They weren't sure about how shadows work. Now, shadows are a little complicated. So I want to get into, I'm just looking at some names here of people and stuff. And I want to talk about shadows and how they work. Now, a simple drop shadow, that's no problem. It's just a shadow being cast by something against a wall and so on. A shadow that's a little more complex, like going across the ground and up the wall, that's what I'm going to discuss about. Try to discuss right now. Now, on the screen here, I've got one of my paintings. I got Damon, which I did 3 shows on a long time ago. But I want to talk about this one just to give you the idea of how these shadows are going to work. Now, let's just say that this is an existing shot, which it is, right? This is a painting, but let's make believe it's a photograph. And we want to put something right here on this platform. So let's just say I'm going to go in here, and in a layer, I'm going to go in here and create this little shape like this. And we'll add a little circular section to the bottom of it, right down here like that. All right, just like that. And I'm going to fill that with a nice little gradient. Let's go from this dark gray here to this lighter gray, like that. And with a gradient that's linear, I'm going to go in here and create this little shape like that. Now on the top, I'll give it a little circular selection on top, just like that. And I'm going to fill that with that light color. So there's this little shape. Now it's casting a shadow. It has to cast a shadow because everything else is casting a shadow. Now I'm not sure where that light's coming from. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little line of sight experimentation here. In another layer, I'm going to create a little guide for myself. I'm going to get a color that I can really see, like this red. And with my line tool, which I'm going to choose right here, and make sure it's set to pixels, I'm going to start right here at the shadow, right here at the edge of the shadow, and draw a line that goes up to the top edge, right here, of the object that's casting that shadow. Right there, like that. Okay, and it's a very thin line, so I'll tell you what, why don't we make it a 20-point line, 20 pixels. All right, let's try it again so we can really see this. Let's go up there, and we go right to this edge, and there's my line of sight. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that and move that over here, right here to this shape. There we see it. That's where the shadow is going to end, right there, straight across. I can see from everything else that the shadows are pretty much straight across. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate my little disc there, my little cylinder, and the one in back, I'm going to lock the transparency and fill it with black. So now I can go in there and distort that. I'm going to take that shape, maybe do a little rotate on it first, like so. Move it into position right here where I want it. Okay, and there's my little guide. See, I see that. So now I can go in there and do a little distort. So I can pull this side over, like so, and pull this side like that. And just do this, just like so. Click OK, make it happen. We can get rid of this little piece on the side here. So I'm just going to erase this little chunk right through there. Let's unlock the transparency, and there we go. And just erase that little piece right there. Bring down the opacity a little bit, and turn off that guide layer. And there we see that we're casting a shadow that follows the line of sight of everything else. Now, because this is rounded, this could have been a little more rounded up there. That's just a question of then either creating it yourself by creating a nice little bevel up there, or just kind of modifying the existing one. But now we're going to create a little more complex of a shadow. A little more complex. Let's get rid of this. And I've got this scene right here. Now this is going to be a little more complex because I have this tree here, and it's going to be casting a shadow straight back and up the wall. So there's where it gets complicated. Quite a few people have sent me examples of stuff that they've done, and this is one thing that they've overlooked, is how a shadow actually travels. If you're not sure, study reality. Line something up against the floor there and hit it with a spotlight or a nice strong light, and watch how the shadow travels over objects and up walls. That's what we need to do here. We're going to create the illusion by creating 2 shadows. I'm going to duplicate the layer of the tree, turn off the eye for the one on top, and the one in back, I'm going to lock the transparency and fill it with black, just like I did before. So now I'm going to unlock the transparency so we can manipulate this. I'm going to duplicate it again. I duplicated that shadow layer, so I have two of them. All right, so I'm going to take the one that's currently selected and I'm going to skew it. Let's give it a nice skew. I'm going to go in here and say skew that shadow. Let's grab the little handle and let's skew it way over like this. All right, let's move the whole scene over so we can skew it even more. There we go. We have this long shadow like that. There it is. Now, as the shadow gets further away from the object, it starts to get a little blurrier. So, look what I have here. I happen to have an alpha channel that's going to expose the part of the image that I need to blur, right over here. So, I'm going to go ahead and load that alpha channel. And if you're not sure how this alpha channel is working, an earlier episode I explained alpha channels. So go there and see it. I'm going to load that. And in that layer of the shadow, the one that's skewed, I'm going to go in there and apply a filter of Gaussian blur. And we'll just blur it a little bit. Let's say about 2.1. That's good. Click OK. I can deselect that. Bring down the opacity to say 80%, and I got this nice soft shadow. I'm now going to give it a mask. Give that layer a layer mask, reveal all, and we'll create a little tiny gradient. Linear gradient. Right in here, I'll create a little gradient, just like that. Made that part disappear. Let's go in there and make it a little straighter. And I'll tell you what, we'll hold the shift key to constrain that. There we go, nice and straight. And maybe we'll bring down the opacity for that just a little more. Bring it down to about 66. That's good. Now it's got to go up the wall. See, it's skewed as it's going across the ground, but now going up the wall, that's where the second one comes in. So I grab that second shadow, bring it into position. Now it's further away, so first thing I'm going to do is make it smaller. So I'm going to go in there and scale it down. Make it much smaller because it's much further away. Click OK. Put it into position right about there where I want it. And give that same Gaussian blur that we gave the other one. So we just say Gaussian blur. There it is. Bring down the opacity to the same as the other one, which is about 65. There it is. And give this one a layer mask as well. So I say reveal all. Give it that little tiny gradient right in here. Just like that. And there we see that we have the illusion of this shadow traveling across the ground and then up the wall. Keeping in mind that as it got further away, it got smaller. And as it got further away, it got blurrier. Right behind the tree trunk right here, you see it is sharp and it's getting softer as it gets further away. And then the one going up the wall is completely soft and much smaller. Again, it's studying reality that's going to teach you how these things work. Light things. Look at how lights are working. Look at how reflections are working. Look how highlights are working. These are the things that are going to make things look real. It's how light hits things. In next week's episode, light is going to play a very crucial role in getting what a substance is made of. Best way to go in here and learn this stuff is observation and playing with the program. Don't think of it as working, think of it as playing. Have a good time, and I'll see you in the next show. Hi, and welcome once again to Pixelperfect with me, Bert Monroy, the show where I show you Photoshop stuff and whatever else comes to mind. I want to start off by thanking my sponsor, GoDaddy.com, the guys who will set up your website, your domain name, and even design it for you. They have a special that if you type in the code of PERFECT, as you see on the screen right here, you will get an additional $5 off of any order of $30 or more. That's a pretty good deal. They'll even they have another special, Pixel. There's two different codes for you. In Pixel, they'll be able to give you a your domain name for $6.95 a year. really good deals from those guys. Go over to GoDaddy.com and see what they got offered for you. All right, now I want to answer some questions of viewers, and it deals with patterns. Now, I did patterns a long time ago. I did a brick pattern, which is an interlocking pattern. I want to discuss an interlocking pattern again, but a little more complex this time. I got, like, for instance, I got Justin Van Genderen, if I say it wrong, sorry, Bob Moniz, and actually Michael Hoffman and Jonas Latza, and Jason had some reptile skin, and Gregory Warner. These are all people who wanted to see something done with 3D. Now, they had some ideas of things they wanted, so that's what I want to get into. Interlocking patterns, the complex patterns. Patterns are real simple to create, very simple. But when a pattern is an interlocking pattern, that's a little more complex. Now, what I want to do is the front of a G5. That's that metal that we have in the front of the G5 computers, and the new Power Macs. They have all those little holes cut into the metal. Now, that's very important right there. Little holes cut into metal. Now, what's important here is that what makes it metal? How it reacts to light. That's what's going to make it metal. Turn off the lights in the room where you are, nothing's there. Can't see anything. Turn on the lights, and that's where you'll see things that are made of plastic and things that are made of metal, fruits, vegetables. You see what they are because of how they react to light. So I'm going to create a pattern of those little holes on the front of the computer. The little holes go at angles. They're not straight up and down. So there's the complexity, that interlocking holes that are going at angles. And the most important thing is the fact that those little holes are cut into metal. So at first, when I start to create this pattern, some things are not going to make sense. But then when you see the whole thing come together, you're going to see. What makes it metal is how it reacts to light. So now, the very important thing about an interlocking pattern is perfect symmetry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on my grid. I'm going to show my grid so I can really see what I'm going to do here. And I'm going to come in close now. I'm going to zoom in on a little area of 5 blocks there. And using my circular or elliptical selection tool, I'm going to select a circle right here that's going to snap to one of those sections. In a separate layer, I'm going to take that and I'm going to fill it with a 50% gray, a nice gray. And then with my paintbrush, and I got it set to white right here, I'm going to make sure that my brush engine, I'm going to go to my brushes, I'm going to make sure that I have things turned off, and I'm going to just click up here with the white and shift click down below here. Now, switching to black, I'm going to throw a little black right in that edge there. And with a larger brush, I'll just throw a little black along that edge there. Now, what is that stuff? That's the reaction to light. That's going to make it metal. Now, to establish the interlocking effect, that alone could be a pattern. But it would be circles that are straight up and down, straight across. So what I need to do is to have them go in at angles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this guy, holding down my Option and Command, Alt and Control on a PC, and drag them over, leaving 2 subdivisions in between. And it's snapping to my grid. 2 subdivisions in between. Now I will establish that angle by creating a duplicate that's directly centered under those 2 subdivisions. See, I'm starting to establish the angle. Now I'm going to bring them down and do 2 more down at the bottom. So now I have 5. 5 that are creating my pattern that goes at angles. So let me deselect that. Now I'm going to create the pattern. I'm going to switch to my rectangular marquee tool and find a place where these outer circles intersect. And it happens to be the very center point. So I'm going to select a nice big rectangle that goes from the center of each of the 4 outside circles. See that? Now when you look at this, we see that on the upper left here, we're seeing the lower right of that circle. Where are the other 3? Here, here, and here. See? That's establishing that angle. Now, I also want the area in between to be transparent, so I'm going to turn off my background so that the area in between is transparent, and I'm going to say, Edit, Define Pattern. There it is. And we'll call it Holes. You got to spell it right? You know how to spell it, right? Okay. Click OK. That's it. I can now select all and throw them away. Deselect. And I'm going to pull back a little bit, just so we see a little more of this scene here. Okay, now, in my background layer here, let's turn off our grid. We don't need it anymore, so show, turn off grid. There it is. In our background, I got this, I'm going to get this dark gray, this deep gray, and for my foreground color, I get a nice lighter gray like that. And with my gradient tool, I'm going to use the reflective gradient. And I'll throw a little gradient right through there like that. And that layer that I had originally created the pattern in, I'm going to create two rectangles. First one like this, and give that a little reflective gradient inside. These are the objects that are visible through the holes. I'm going to duplicate that guy straight down, holding down my Option, Command, and Shift key. Let's make a copy straight down. Deselect that. Now in a layer above that, I'm going to fill that with the pattern. I'm going to go in here and say Pattern, and I'm going to choose that one, the one I just created. Click OK. There's the little holes. Now they don't look like little holes. So let me just duplicate that layer. That's already got the pattern. And the layer that's duplicated, I'm going to lock the transparency, switch back to black and white for my foreground and background, and fill it with black. Now I'm hitting keyboard commands here. To do that fill I just did right now, I just did an Option Delete, which would be Alt Backspace. It fills the selection, or in this case the active pixels in the layer, with the foreground color. Command Delete, which would be Control Backspace on a PC, would do it with the background color. And Shift Delete, Shift Backspace, brought up the little dialog box where I originally picked the pattern. So now there's the holes. Those look like holes. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take those little objects that are visible through the holes and put them above that layer so that they are on top, right up here, right there, and I'm going to clip them. I'm going to clip them with the holes. Option, click between those two layers, and now it looks like we're seeing through the holes at those two objects. I'm going to merge that down to make those into one layer. Now, why did I do this? All right, let's bring this back. There's the holes with the objects visible through them. I'm going to clip that layer with the layer that contains the original pattern that had those funny little tones in it. Now, the bottom layer right now, you see it's underlined layer 2. That's the base layer. That's the one that has the original pattern. When I take that top layer and move it over a couple, let's just shift it with our cursor keys a little over to the left and up a little bit. There we see why I created those tones. That's the effects of light that turned that into a thick piece of metal. Before it was just holes on, could have been a sheet of paper. Now it's a thick piece of metal. Why? Because we created the illusion of the effect of light hitting all those little holes. They're all in the exact same position because it is a pattern. Very difficult to go in there and paint those after the fact. But since they were added into the original pattern, it made it real easy to create the effects of light to make something look like metal and then complete the overall scene using a couple of clipping groups. So there's an interlocking pattern where all the holes are going at angles. If you want it to be a little closer, then maybe I would have separated things by a single subdivision and so on. These are all things that you determine. There's no formula in what I did here. The steps are a formula, but the actual measurements are not. That is up to what you're doing. I hope you learned something from this. Remember to play. Sit there and play and create all kinds of cool patterns. And send me stuff when you do something really cool. I look at a lot of stuff and sometimes I'll give comments. I can't promise I'll answer every email because I do get a lot of them. But I try to answer as many as I can. Hope you learned something from today. I hope to see you next time. To Pixelperfect with me, Bert Monroy, the show where I show you Photoshop stuff and whatever else comes up. Now, I wasn't in last week, and I got a lot of emails saying, hey, where were you? I'm glad I was missed. It's nice to be back, and I'm sorry I took a week off. Now I got to read my little ad here. I want to thank my sponsor, GoDaddy.com. Got some specials here. It says, get $96 in free extras with your domain name from GoDaddy.com. Each domain includes free hosting with a website builder, a free blog, and complete email and much more. Just enter the code PIXEL, the one you're seeing right there on the screen, when you check out, and your .com domain name for just $6.95 a year. Some restrictions apply. See site for details, the blah, blah, blah stuff. Okay, so now, I also got a lot of emails of people that know that I introduced a new painting at Photoshop World a month ago. And how come it's not on my site? Well, one of the reasons it's not on my site is because it's not actually finished yet. I got it to a certain point so I could show it at Photoshop World, but there's still some little fine details that I have to add in and so on. So right here on the screen, we have it. It's called Lunch in Tiburon. This is my newest piece. It looks finished, but to me, there's still some little details that have to be done. Like here, I'll just zoom in on a little napkin over here, and you can see that the napkin is just a little too thin on this edge. To me, that's not done. I have to go in there and just add some last-minute details to make it look right. And yeah, you might say it's a kind of a self-portrait, because if you get in real close over here, you'll see that I am right in there on the salt and pepper shakers, right on the top. But there's the newest painting. Now I'm going to cover some of what I've done with this in this show. One thing I want to stress is I've mentioned before about studying reality, looking how things work, right? Well, I don't take anything for granted. I just don't go in there and try to guess at how something's going to look. I actually study reality. I'm going to zoom in over here on this little glass up here. Way up here. There's the little edge of the glass, and you can see the reflection right in here, the reflection of the tablecloth on that little section of glass. Now, to get that right, I wasn't sure how it was going to look and so on, so I went and actually studied things. I have a file right here called a reflection study, and you can see what I've done. I took a section of the tablecloth and I printed it on a regular laser writer with a little black ink, and then I took a little tiny mirror that we see right here, a little mirror, and taped it on the side of a Kleenex box, and I just put it in position. Then I studied how that reflection was working. So I'm studying reality. I didn't have an actual glass and the tablecloth, but I had my illustration of the tablecloth, so I created a little dummy tablecloth, and then I studied in that little mirror what was happening. How were the little blocks being distorted and so on? How did they work with that particular angle? So I set up a little model for myself. And that's something you should do. Instead of trying to guess how light is going to hit, how a shadow is going to work and so on, just take a couple of little objects, some toys, whatever it is, or just look out the window at things and see how things work. That way you get an accurate visual. Now, I want to talk about that tablecloth. That's what I'm going to talk about here. Now, the original pattern, and here's the actual file for the pattern itself. Let's go in here and let's just minimize this guy so we see the pattern. The pattern actually started in Illustrator, and there's been a lot of requests for Illustrator. So in a couple of weeks, I'm going to do a few shows on Illustrator, showing you some of the features that are in that program that make it so powerful. It's part of the Creative Suite, so most of you have it already. So I'm going to start showing you some of the power in that program. And it is the program that I pretty much start everything in. That's my drawing tablet. That's where I go in there and create all the visuals, the shapes and so on that get brought into Photoshop, where I render the final image. That's where I added the textures and stuff like that. But it all pretty much starts in Illustrator. So we'll discuss Illustrator in a few weeks. So here's the pattern. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how the pattern started. Way back here, as always, I start off with a blank screen. And in there, I just created this one little block. Let's zoom in on it, and you can see it. It's just some shapes, some very simple shapes that I went in there with some lines, and it's just a brush that I just stroked. That brush was a little uneven and so on. There's a whole episode on brushes. You can go back and see how that was done. And I added little whites and stuff just to give it a little randomness to it. In there, I added the little rosette. That is what was created in Illustrator, that little shape right there. That was on Illustrator, one shape which I duplicated around and so on, and I got added in. We pull back just a little, and I added a second one. Now, it is slightly different. You notice that right here, these little white tones are different. I'm starting to add a little variety. I don't want to have just one block and then duplicate it many times. I want to add variety, so when you look at that, it looks like each block is different. Now, if you study it closely, you'll see that the block over here on the lower left is exactly like the block on the way up on the upper right. But even after this tablecloth is done, it's going to be displaced. So there'll be randomness all over the place. But I started the randomness right here at this level right now. And there's another little blue rosette down there, which has a background behind it. Again, a brush, a simple brush that's changing in size randomly. So I'm creating that little speckle behind it. Then there's a whole series of those. Again, there's a little variety in each one, so they start to look different. There's some blocks in here, which is just a series of filters, basically noise, pixelate, find edges. That's how I got those little tones in there. And then a texture right on top of that. This same texture is going to be used later to displace the entire image so that it gets that real pebbly kind of an effect. And there were some guides. There's the guides that I actually used originally to know where these things are going to fall. So once I had that shape created, I went in there, and here you can see all the other patterns in place. I went in there and I created my actual pattern. Now to create the pattern, let me turn on the guides. I went in there and selected an area right here where they intersect. The inside center of the outer florets, where I got just that little square. So that was my pattern right there, that whole shape. All right, so we have the little step and repeat going on. The three sides that are missing over here are being replicated here, here, and so on, and below. So now once that was all done, I filled the entire thing with the pattern. Now this file here is actually larger than the real file I was going to create. So now I'm going to go in there and create a new file, and you'll see why it's larger. Let me say new. And the actual file was much bigger than this one's going to be, because right now is 24 by 16 at 300. So what I'm going to do is make a 16 by 12 at 300. So we'll make this 16 by 12 at 300. The actual file was 15 by 20, or actually 20 by 15 at 480. Why those numbers? 15 by 20 because way back in the day when I used to work traditionally, and I would go to the art supply store to buy my Bainbridge board where I create my illustrations, they always came in 15 by 20. Also 15 by 20 is divisible by just about everything. 1114, 810, 640 by 480, 1024 by 768. All those are proportioned to 15 by 20. So I start off at 15 by 20. And why 480 DPI? Well, 300 is not going to give me enough resolution to create the detail that I want. And even at 480 sometimes is not enough. So some of the elements are created at 600 or 1200 DPI in order to go in there and get a lot of fine detail, which then I bring it down to the size that I need for the final image, and I'm going to get a nice clear image. But right here for the purpose of the demo, we're going to do it at 300. So I click OK, and there's my file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my tablecloth back here, that layer that has the pattern, and I'm just going to drag it over onto this file here. I held down my shift key to constrain the proportions when it came in and centered it. So I'm going to throw this guy away. Now I have this guy. I'm going to go in here and zoom out so I can see my work area. Now the reason I created it much bigger is because I now have to distort this. So I'm going to go in here to my distortion, transform, distort, and you can see that it's much larger than the actual image. So I'm going to just kind of move it over into this area here. And I'm going to grab this area and just bring it down like that. Bring this guy in like that. Way over. So I start to get this kind of a distortion that you're seeing here. And once I have the shape the way I want it, and we can pull this guy out a little more, I click OK. And it happens. It is now distorted into that entire area. Now I still have that excess on the outsides. That information is still there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a select all, Command A, and just go in there and crop it. So now that excess stuff on the outside is gone. Now, once this was done, if you look at the painting, there was a slight little bevel, a slight movement to the cloth. It's not laying completely flat on the table. So I created this. This is a displacement map. And I've done quite a few shows where I've used the displace filter. Now, when you look at the painting, you'll see like right in here, you see how there's a little bubbling going on right in this area here, and up in here, and in here. You can see where the tablecloth is just bent just a little bit. It's a very bright sun in this outdoor cafe. Very bright sun. So you're not going to see a lot of different shadows in there. It's just slight little highlights, like right in here and right in there, and a slight, very slight shadow, extremely slight. So I used this displacement map to bend the tablecloth. And you can see the darks, as you know, are going to move things down into the right, and the whites are going to move things up into the left. The gray area, the 50% gray neutral density, will have no effect. So it's just in these particular areas that my tablecloth is going to get bent. So I can go in here and take this tablecloth, which is that layer right there, and I'll say filter, distort, displace, and I'm going to exaggerate it. In the actual painting, I used like a 3 and 4. But here I'm going to go in and say 20 and 20. So I'm really going to exaggerate this. And when I click OK and it asks me for that displacement map, I go in there, look for it, and it's right here. And I open it, and you'll see that it's going to bend the cloth in the right places. There you can see the bends happen, right in there. So now as a final thing, I can take this image and put it into position, right on top of this guy. Because that is what created the displacement, so that's going to give me the effect I want. I'm going to put it into a different mode, like say overlay. So it just becomes this little exaggerated thing there. I'm going to just reduce the opacity considerably, so I just get these little slight highlights and shadows in the areas where it got bent. So that's basically how the background was created for that painting. Now this could be applied to so many different things. You can have a gravel or a stone texture that you're going to apply to the ground, and I'm just creating those little ripples. You would do the same thing. How you apply that technique depends on what it is that you're creating. So I just wanted to give you an idea there of how this painting started, and we started with the basic tablecloth. Next week's show, we're going to get a little more complicated with it. Hope you learned something from this. Remember to play. Best way to learn is to sit there and play. See you next week.